Hello and welcome to another rousing edition of CPR, Classic Puck Review, brought to you by Laymansports.com. I'm your host, Robbie Cameron, and with me are the dynamic duo of Mr. Michael Beda and Mr. Derek Bressette. How's it hanging, gents?
Pretty good. I'm stoked for this episode. We're doing this on a late Saturday morning because someone slept through their alarm on Thursday night when they were supposed to do it then.
Who's that? I don't think that was me.
I don't think it was me. Was it you, Derek?
No, I think I have an alibi. I was hanging out with Beda all night on Thursday. So.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, you and I were sitting there waiting for someone to show up.
We went through our list together. Robbie's the only one that doesn't know what's going on now.
I don't know what happened there, bad boys, but here we are. We're here. No living in the past. Let's just stay present. That's why we're counting down the top defensemen of all time.
Is that the truth?
By all time, we mean playing right now. And by right now, we mean in the gap between the season ending and starting again. Is it going to be weird watching hockey in like the middle of August? Is this going to be weird?
No, I'll be fine with it.
I'll have a snow globe by the TV, though, to make me feel a little wintry.
Put the air conditioning on really high.
Well, especially with this heat wave we've had.
By the time the Stanley Cup comes around anyways, like it's already the dead of summer, so.
Yeah, it'll be, I mean, we watched, exactly. It's just like the World Series and the Stanley Cup just need to like switch spots for a year. Yeah. We'll do the baseball season through the winter and have the World Series in like the spring, and then we get the Stanley Cups in the fall now.
Yeah. You guys are doing good though. We don't need to touch up on your personal lives.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, no, my personal life is quite boring. Okay. All I do is sit here and make podcasts and talk about old hockey games with you guys. So that's the extent of the personalized. Maybe watch a rugby game every now and then, but
you're living your best life, and we love you for it. Well, this time around, we are counting down the top 20 defensemen of all time. I don't know why. I kind of told you guys this before, but listing this was much tougher than the top 25 goalies of all time. Especially through 16 through 20. I mean, do you guys have any basic criteria for what you wanted to try and get into your list? Or was it just kind of, if they won a Norris, they're in?
Well, I don't have Randy Carlyle on my list as the top 20 defensemen of all time. So if you won a Norris, it doesn't automatically make you or put you in the top 20. But I think, obviously, Norris trophies is a little bit of a thing to consider because that's kind of, even just in general, like the opinion of like, hey, you're the best defenseman in the league. So that can kind of go a long way, especially, I mean, obviously, which I'm assuming we're going to hear some names at the top of the list are going to be some of the guys that have like multiple Norris trophies. So that it's obviously something that comes into play. But I mean, like, for me, it was just like, I guess I kind of took in just like a bunch of different things. And just, I did my best again to not, type into Google. I did my best again to not type into Google the top 25 best defensemen of all time list and kind of like look all of those up. And upon, and I just kind of tried to base it off of like my own criteria and everything. So got obviously, like, I kind of have a mix of guys, mix of the offensive defenseman, mix of the defensive defenseman, which especially for the defensive defenseman is like some of those guys, like that's not a thing that the, as weird as it is, the Norris Trophy doesn't seem to really award that at all, right? It's like, for most of the time, it's the Norris Trophy kind of goes to the defenseman that has a ton of points, or who is also maybe good defensively, but sometimes it's like, no, he just had a ton of points, and it's weird. I always found it kind of weird that there's an award for like the Selke Trophy exists as an award for the best defensive forward.
Yeah.
But we have just the Norris Trophy for the best defenseman, but there's no Norris Trophy for like the best defensive defenseman.
Yeah.
So I think for that, a lot of the times, the Norris Trophy kind of ignores the defensive side of the game a little bit. So I tried to get a couple guys in there that kind of really honor that side of the game as well. For myself, I kind of when I was playing hockey, I played defense. So there's a lot of like remembering of like when I was playing, and especially for some of the more modern-ish guys, just kind of be like, oh, I really want to try to play like that guy. So there's a little bit of that kind of factoring into the list as well. So just kind of a mix of all around criteria. And obviously I dove into like some of the statistical categories and things like that as well, that, you know, just to kind of, you know, back up the arguments for why I think these guys rank where they do.
Yeah. How about you, Beta? Do you have any basic criteria for your list?
Yeah, I guess like the most basic of criteria, unlike the goaltender one, there's a lot more thought that went into trying to represent different facets of a game because it is such an individualist position. You know, there's goalies are meant to be wacky, and there's only one of them that plays at a time on the ice for each team, of course, whereas defensemen, you know, like you got to cater to your pairing and how you play the game. It isn't so much how you teach it. It's not about, you can't teach height, you can't teach size, you can't teach heart. So basically, whatever other facets of their game that made them dependable and reliable, I just tried to take into account different eras, but when it really came down to it, when I had to whittle it down to 20 and then with a few honorable mentions, you'd be pleased to hear that I did cast aside a lot of my archaic players just because, you know, they don't pan out in the same light as the ones that really were pivotal down the stretch, at least in the past half century, let's say. But yeah, cups are really helpful because, I mean, they do pay, you know, a huge tribute to the team and contribute drastically to the team. Norris's definitely help as well. Essentially, I didn't look at any list of prior rankings on various mediums either, like Derek did, but I did go through every defenseman inducted to the Hockey Hall of Fame and kind of, I wrote them all out, and then I kind of whittled it down to who might make the cut, who would I consider doing a little bit of research on. And then I had that down to about 34 at the time. And then it was pretty easy to get down to 27 approximately. I'm like, oh, these people can be cut. But yeah, cutting it from 27 to 22-ish was very, very difficult indeed. It's kind of like, where do I weigh defensive defensemen, two-way players, offensive scorers? So I did try to get a little bit of a mix in there. But you'll notice essentially everybody in my list is a Hall of Famer unless they're a current player.
Yeah, I kind of did the same. I think I valued hardware kind of over overall points. You'll probably see that in my list, Jared. Like, there's a few guys that you would probably have on your top 25 list if we did a top 25 list. But for a top 20, I wanted to kind of reserve my spots for guys who had won either A. Norris, Smythe, yada, yada, yada. So if you didn't win anything, chances are you're not on my list. So shout out to those guys.
Shout out.
Yeah. But I think what we'll do is we'll list off our honorable mentions first. The order last time was Derek, me, then Beta. So this time around we'll go Beta, then me, then Derek. List off 5 at a time, just like we did previous. And then we'll discuss the choices and move right along. So, Mr. Beta, why don't you give us your honorable mentions to start us off here?
Sure, yeah, I'll be extremely brief with the honorable mentions because, of course, they didn't make the actual cut of the top 20, but I did want to give them a little quick shout out. A little bit diverse background here. So 25, I have Duncan Keith. I only have one current player in my top 20, but Duncan Keith, also a current player, just rounding out the edge of my honorable mentions. I mean, he was he was one of the best back when they were winning cups between 2010 to 2015. Of course, he's approaching his late 30s now, Winnipeg born, late second round pick by the Blackhawks back in 2002. So almost 20 years ago. So it shows the longevity of his career, even though he's been kind of dog shite the last few years since they haven't won a cup. But international, gold medal, both 2010, 2014 Olympics with Team Canada, 2-time Norris in 2010, 2014. Both those years he was a first-team All-Star as well. And then just a few years ago, even though he didn't have a super impressive season in 2017, still at 53 points. He was a second-team All-Star. Career high 69 points in 2010, the first year that they won the cup. So I do got to show him some love because he was kind of at the peak of his game. World Championship 2008 as well. So triple gold member, wouldn't he be, I suppose? 24, I have Valery Vasilyev. I want to show some love to the Soviet Union. Vasilyev had a heart attack in 1978 while he was still playing and still championed the Soviet Union to all of those victories in the 70s and early 80s. Let's see, Olympic gold in 1972, World Cups all throughout that span as well. In 72, after they lost to the Czechoslovakian nation there. Canada Cup in '76 as well. He was on the Olympic team that lost the Miracle on Ice, but a true champion of the game. Played for Dynamo Moscow, had 186 points in 600 approximate games. I think that he is could be on the cusp of making the Hall of Fame once we kind of allow a few more of those kind of international players that got shunned from the NHL in the Iron Curtain. So yeah, not a Hall of Famer, but worthy of an honorable mention. 23, I have Emile Butch Bouchard, famous Habs defenseman there from 1941 to 1956. Had a great reputation as being a clean player, but would often dish out one of the strongest and hardest body checks of the 40s. Vicious highlight reel of hits for Butch Bouchard. It was nice at the 100th anniversary of the Montreal Canadiens back in 2009. They retired his jersey number. He was confined to a wheelchair at that point. Then he passed away a few years later at the age of 92 back in 2012. But Hall of Famer since 1966. Very defensive defenseman. Finished his career with 194 points in 785 games. So a little representation from the defensive side. His career high for points was 34 back in 1944-45, the year that Maurice Richard had his 50 and 50. So 34 points in 50 games, pretty decent for a defensive defenseman, so to speak. Under 900 penalty minutes. So played the body, right-handed shooter, 4-time All-Star team selection, won 4 cups. So Butch Bouchard, shout out Butch. 22, I have another Soviet defenseman, Alexander Ragulin. He's deceased as well, died in 2004-ish. 3 Olympic golds, about 9 world championships. He played a little bit, about a decade before Vasilyev, so he was kind of the outspoken leader for the Soviet Union in the 60s. I believe he played all but 2 of the games in the Summit Series because he was already kind of in his early 30s, and by that point the Soviet Union was pretty much done. But Alexander Ragulin, I think another possible Hall of Fame candidate in the not-so-distant future. And then rounding out my honorable mention, I feel awful for the fact that this person had to place 21st, but just missing out on my 20th spot is Scott Niedermayer. Do love Scott Niedermayer, of course.
What?
Yeah. What? Scott Niedermayer.
Wow.
Your top 20 defenseman?
No, he's not. He's 21st, as I just said.
Oh,
Norris Trophy 2004, Conn Smythe when the Ducks won their only cup in 2007. He's in the Hockey Hall of Fame and NHL's list of top 100 players of all time. Triple Gold Club. His resume is very, very impressive. Great leader. 3rd overall pick back in '91. Olympic gold, 2 Olympic golds. But yeah, I was like, who is going to be the unlucky son of a gun who just misses the cut?
And it's
Our boy Scotty.
Scott Niedermayer.
Yes, sir.
Has 4 cups, a Conn Smythe trophy, arguably the best skater of all time, and was like Olympic captain. He captained Team Canada in 2010. I don't.
Yeah, and he's going to be your number 2 or something like that. Just wait.
He's high. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's. I get. It's not even like. I mean, for me, like I don't know where Robbie has him, but like I'm shocked that you just said that name. Is out just because like.
I'm looking forward to seeing it. No.
Yeah. It's like, it's not even like I
man.
have Niedermayer at like 19 or 18 or something. Like,
Yeah, he's
it's
pretty
like,
high on my list too.
he's up there.
He's
So
deep,
that's,
The first
yeah.
shocker of the day.
Ooh, goodness gracious. Yeah. I don't know, man. Like, he put up points. He had
Although,
a few 50-point seasons, but.
Well, okay. Well, I'll go with my honorable mentions. I'll just list them off real quick. I had guys like Larry Murphy, Phil Housley, Boris Salming, Rod Langway, Sergevard. Those are my honorable mentions.
Nice.
They had a lot of points. They won a lot. Some of the most respected D-men in their eras. Just not guys that I could put in my top 20. No particular order. I didn't order them from 25 to 21 or anything like that. But just giving them some love. They just didn't quite make the cut. That's all.
yeah, I think for mine too, I had Housley and Murphy just outside my top 10 as well. And,
top 10?
Or it's not just outside. Excuse me. We're doing a top 20 list. I had them just outside my top 20. I'm thrown off because if they're way behind Niedermayer, so I was like not really sure where exactly to put them. But yeah, so I had Housley and Murphy just outside my top 10. Which after making the list, I was kind of like, damn, like they have 1,000 points,
Yeah.
and I just left them off. I just want to, kind of point out, some of the legends that kind of played. It's even like pre-original Six era that don't necessarily get as much love as they should, like Eddie Gerard, Sprague, Cleghorn, King Clancy, some of the first great superstar defensemen of the NHL. I don't know if I would really rank them in like the top 25, but I was just kind of like, they're the best guys of their era, and it's an era that sometimes isn't talked about as much anymore. But especially for like, as far as like the physicality of the game, like Sprague Cleghorn probably end up in jail for a lot of the stuff that he ended up doing on the ice. So, Eddie Gerard was, integral part of those Ottawa Senators teams that dominated the 20s. And, King Clancy, one of the first like true Leaf legends as he emerged in the 30s as well. I did want to show a little bit of love to a Russian that Beda did not mention as well, Vladimir Konstantinov. He's kind of had an interesting career. He only got to play 6 years in the NHL, won Stanley Cup with the Detroit Red Wings, and then, tragically that car accident after they won the Stanley Cup ended his career. He only got to play 6 years in the NHL. The last 2 years, he was really high in the Norris Trophy rankings. He just lost the Norris Trophy to Brian Leach in 1997. So he was just second. And it's like, if he got to play a little bit more, he probably could have figured out a way to actually win that Norris Trophy. And it's kind of one of those things where the career is cut short. So it's like, it's tough to really know where to rank him, but it's like, if he got a full career out of it, like I think he could have definitely had a Hall of Fame career. And just because, and I wasn't sure if I was going to say it because I was like, he's probably going to come up on one of your guys' list. But since Beda was already like, yeah, I didn't have Scott Niedermayer on, the biggest name that I probably left off was Tim Horton.
Yeah.
No. So just, he made some great donuts, but not good enough to quite crack the top 10 or the top 20. I keep saying top 10, top 20 list of best defensemen of all time. But he was definitely, if you listen to the way guys talk about how he played and stuff, he's certainly one of the strongest players of all time, and one of the toughest opponents that you could have possibly played against back in the original Six era.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it was funny. Shout out to Sprague Cleghorn for your honorable mention. That's pretty cool. Yeah, he probably would be in jail if he were playing in today's day and age. There's the one game he went headhunting on the Sens back in like 22. Put 3 of them out of the game. Back then they only had a roster of 9, so they pretty much had no one on the bench to finish the game, like between concussions, broken arms, broken legs. Frank Nyborg was out of the game. Eddie Gerard, I think, actually had to leave with concussion.
Oh, like Cleghorn is legitimately a convicted felon if he played in today's game. Like, yeah, it's.
Then they fined him $20 at the end of that game.
Wow.
$20. That's
Which sounds like it was probably a lot. Like,
yeah.
Back then, though. Like that doesn't. Yeah. Like that doesn't sound like it was cheap back then. But
all right, well, Beda, give us your starting 5.
Yeah, who the hell is better than Scott Niedermayer?
I was just gonna say, how we were being so.
Every single player.
The story with Sprague Cleghorn when he passed away, he kind of like broke his back and was in a hospital. When he died, his brother Odie, who also played in the NHL and was also an official and coach, died 1 day later from heart failure.
Shout out to the Bighorns.
Anyway, to transition.
Well, to transition, it's like fully that every single player that you mentioned is immediately being compared to Scott Niedermayer right now.
Hey, so glad I went first.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, good sir.
All right, so my number 20 was Derek's number 21 pretty much, which was Tim Horton. Was that where you pretty much had Tim Horton right on the edge? So I got him at 20. Played, he was still playing when he passed away, 44 years old, 24th year in the league, second season with the Buffalo Sabres, who in fact retired his jersey number as well, same with the Leafs there, but Sabres showed him a lot of love. Jim Gregory was telling me about a year and a half ago, rest in peace, Jim, but he was like looking for ice for his Pepsi at some event a couple years ago. He's like, hey, I want to tell you a story. He's like, sit down. And I sat down. Who was with me? I think it was Dylan. He sat down. He's like, we're in the Tim Hortons theater. He's like, on the night of Tim Hortons passing, I get a phone call. I'm in bed. We just played the game against Buffalo. 3:30 in the morning, you got to come down here. You got to identify a body. They called him to identify Tim Hortons' body in the sheet in the wreck because they just knew he would probably be able to be honest about it. He didn't really say why he was the chosen one, but he was on the scene quite early, just outside of St. Catharines. Shout out to Tim, though. By today's standards, 5'10", 180 pounds. For him, though, he was huge. You know that picture that he was like working? That's the story of Jim Gregory telling you how he discovered it.
I mean, if we learned anything last episode, it's like leave it to Beda to bring
Hockey is
some
a dark
morbid
sport.
story into into our podcast. So
tough love. Cochrane boy. If you've ever been up to Cochrane, Ontario, which is about an hour north of Timmins, so that's really slumming it. The Tim Hortons Arena, gotta love it. They have a new one. In like 2006, they built a new arena. I remember the old barn they had was so cold, and the dressing rooms were like in the basement. But there's a children's water park near the new one, which is just pleasant. Yeah, 19 seasons with Toronto Maple Leafs there, of course. Won the cups, all the cups in the 60s. He was around in 51 as well, before he really cemented himself in the lineup there. The cup that Barocco scored the winner. 3-time first-team All-Star, 3-time second-team All-Star, 4 cups. Buffalo Sabres Hall of Fame there in 1982. Their jersey retired 20 years before the Leafs did, which is like baffles me though that Buffalo showed him so much more love. 518 points in just under 1,500 games, so he played a pretty defensive style game. Led career high 12 goals back in 1965, which was no year that he actually made the All-Star team, but statistically put up some bangers there. And his last season with the Leafs put up a career high 40 points and was just famous for playing the body. So I show a lot of love to Tim. Number 19, say what you will. I was trying to think outside the box here, and I do want to show some love to the women out there. So I have Angela Ruggiero at number 19 all time. American, of course, 40 years old now. Hall of Famer since 2015. California born. Shout out to California. She won't like that I'm giving her weight here, but she was pretty sizable back on the point. 192 pounds, defenseman, 5'9", 4-time Olympian, 8 years on the IOC. So she's the reason that all your videos are getting blocked, Robbie, when you upload them. Named the best player in the NCAA history in the hockey news, and was named the U.S. Olympic Committee's Player of the Year back when she was on the scene in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. 4 successive Olympic medals there. You got the gold in 98 in Nagano, silver after they lost to Team Canada in 2002 and in 2010, and then you also got a bronze in 2006. Played in 10 Women's World Championships, 4 golds there, another 6 silvers, so she either only came first or second. Named the best D twice at the Olympics and 4 times at the World Championship. 4th woman inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame, 2nd American-born after Kemi Granado, I suppose. All-time leader in games played for Team USA, 256, so I got to show a lot of love to Angela. Not sure if she cracked your list, but I think it's good, little representation out there. Number 18, going backwards in my list here. My notes are all mixed up. Oh, there it is. Excuse me. Excellent. So number 18, someone already mentioned that they were in their honorable mentions. Might have been you, Robbie, but Borje Salming, arguably one of the greatest Leaf defensemen of all time, of course. First true European-born defenseman on the scene that had an impact. 1972, when Team Canada went to Moscow to play the back half of the Summit Series, they played a couple exhibition games against Team Sweden, one of which was a really bloody tie, which was quite thrilling. That's where Wayne Cashman lost half of his tongue. They went to scout Inge Hammerstrom, the Leafs did, and a few other teams in the NHL, but Salming really impressed them at the time. He was only 21 years old, and they're like, damn, we should sign this guy. And then a year after that, he made his debut in 1973 with the Leafs, Hall of Famer since 1996, which was his first year of eligibility. He left the NHL in 1990, but went back to Sweden, played 3 more years with IAK. Is that how you say it? I wish I knew more about Swedish hockey, but retired in 93 officially, and then was eligible in 96, made it instantaneously. Nicknamed the King, not King Henrik, but King Borje, true God. Undrafted, of course, 6'1", 209 pounds, 16 years for the Leafs, 1 year for the Red Wings. Played in 3 Canada Cups, the first 3 there, in 76, 81, and then 91, so the last Canada Cup he played as a 40-year-old. Also played in the 1992 Olympics, which is 20 years after he was first scouted in the Summit Series. So he had a lot of longevity. He has that great picture of him with a scar where he needed over 200 stitches back in 1986. Liked his cocaine a little bit, admitted to doing cocaine. They almost suspended him for the entire season, but then they're like, well, he's not doing it anymore. All he did was say he liked cocaine in interviews. That alone makes him better than Scott Niedermayer, doesn't it? First team All-Star in 1977, 4-time second team All-Star, 75, 76, 78, and 80. So late 70s, arguably one of the best defensemen. even though there were some elite defensemen that will make the list further down that were winning all the Norrises at the time. But yeah, Boria deserves some love. Jersey retired by the Leafs 2006. No more number 21. You won't see that anymore by Leaf. Holds 6 Leaf records, including most points by D-man, most goals by D-man, most assists by any Leaf. Finished his career with 637 career assists, 787 points in about 1,150 games. I find if any D-man has slightly more penalty minutes than they do points, especially if they weren't considered a huge offensive threat, I think that's pretty blessed. So he had 1,300 some penalty minutes, which is about a couple hundred more penalty minutes than points. So I like that. Career high, 78 points in 1977. So Boria.
Penalties are a bad thing, right?
Well, no. Sometimes you just got to set the tone. Sometimes you just got to stand up. Because he was so abused on the ice as a young player. Like, he would get called chicken sweet all the time, told to go home. So he had to defend himself and learn how to play a bit of a physical game. And he is a based god. Don't you have a good story about him where you let him up? Or was that Engstrom that wouldn't let him up?
Oh,
yeah, it was Engstrom?
Yeah.
That's a good story.
I feel like that's everybody's story now, how often it gets told.
My story now. Number 17, here's another one that you're going to be like, well, Niedermayer's not as good. But for me, it's about who you fear on the D. So his teammate Scott Stevens cracked 17 for me. Scott Stevens, who wants to go across the middle against him? I mean, of course, by today's
Who was leading them there? Who was leading them there? Scott
Stevens was a captain, buddy. Like, he was leading them there. Scott Stevens led his team in points in 1994, the game we did with Hasek standing on his head for 4 overtime. Scott Stevens led the New Jersey Devils in points with 78 that year, which is fantastic. 18 goals, 60 assists. Career high 21 goals back when he was playing with the Caps as a young pup. He played with Langway and Murphy with the Caps and was very blessed while doing it. Finished with 908 points in 1,600 games, 2,800 penalty minutes. So, of course, that's not smart. That's not good, but setting the tone and being the most feared hitter of your day, bar none, like, he's got to get some love for that. I mean, people know where Scott Stevens on the ice. Like, who's more worried? When they go in to play the Devils, they're much more worried about playing Scott Stevens than they are Scott Niedermayer, guarantee you.
Well, I mean, it's only because Scott Stevens can end your career, but Scott Niedermayer just didn't hit you nearly as hard. But
if you making a
I'm
play,
not scared of him then.
Yeah. But I think that's part of what made the Devils so good, though. Is like, if you were, an offensive team and you're like, all right, we're going to dump the puck in. And you're like, okay, do I dump it into Stevens' corner, right? So I get killed. Niedermayer's corner, so he does a spin around and fires a stretch pass out to the far blue line. Or just dump it in super hard so Brodeur picks it up and he fires the stretch pass out to the far blue line.
That's a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're not – they had different – I think Niedermayer and Stevens had different styles of play.
Yeah.
But both of them are completely valid and stuff. And it was like – when they were as a pairing, like, there's nothing you can do. You have like the one guy that, if you're afraid to go anywhere near him, and then you have the other guy that it's like once, he gets all that extra space because you're afraid of the one guy, and then he's able to, create all the offense from the back end as well. So it's, that's their dynamic worked really well together.
I mean, like, yeah, it's understandable. Like, who would you rather get fucked by, basically, Stevens or Niedermayer? Of course, Stevens doesn't have a Norris to his credit, as does Niedermayer, but both have Conn Smythes. Stevens had more of an impact in the 2000 playoffs, bar none. Stevens has all 3 cups there with the Devils as well as Niedermayer. Funny that his career comes to an end basically in his 22nd season from concussion compilations when he took a shot to the head. First ballot Hall of Famer as well, class of 2007. Kitchener boy, love his plaque, Wrangler jeans. First name, I think, is Ronald. Not many people know that. But yeah, 13 years with the Devils and captaining them for pretty much all but one of those years. His second year, the Devils, he took over the C. All rookie team, 2-time first team All-Star, 3-time second team. Led the league in plus minus in 1994, same year that he led the team in points. He had a plus 53, which is pretty blessed. Played in the Olympics in 98 when he was already approaching his late 30s, mid-30s, late 30s. Won the Canada Cup with them in 91, though, as well. Yeah, I got to show a lot of love to Scott. Then rounding out my first segment there at number 16 is my only current player, which Robbie loves, Zdeno Chara. I do show love to Zdeno there. I got back on Robbie's good side. I mean, tallest player of all time, 6'9", still playing, 43 years old, same age as Tom Brady. So these guys, they know how to treat their bodies well, especially as a captain. Slovak. Norris in 2009. It's tough to win the Norris in these days, of course, but yeah, he's got one, and he's been eligible for so many years. Like, he's always kind of a finalist. 3-time first-team All-Star, 4-time second. He was a runner-up pretty much 5 times for the Norris, sandwiching around all the year that he did win in 2009. Harder shot competition says a lot too. We were talking about the gimmicks of the All-Star game from last week's episode, but the competitions which really demonstrate your skills. I mean, Chara's got one of the most blistering slap shots of all time. He clocked in at that 108.8 miles per hour. He also led the league in plus minus one year, like Stevens did in 2011, the year that they won the cup, the Bruins did. So yeah, European lifting the cup, that is huge as well. All decade second team in this past decade. So from age 33 to 43 to be considered on the second team as the man. I always forget that he played with the Islanders, was drafted by the Islanders in 96 there, but I definitely remember him with the Sens, and then shortly after the lockout, a couple years after the lockout, being traded to Boston. And oldest defenseman in NHL history to score a goal in the finals a couple months after his 42nd birthday last year. Career high 52 points, so he's not a flashy offensive defenseman, but he is heavily imposing in a different way than Stevens, because he'll ragdoll McCabe like we were joking around in the intro, and you don't want to fuck with him at all. He's just under 2,000 penalty minutes. You know that he's probably not going to retire. He's still got a little pep in his step, but 600 or so points, almost 700 points, career high 19 goals. So yeah, he gets the job done at both ends, and I feel like one of the most respected captains and Europeans of this day. So Chara rounds out my 16. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, like Chara and Stevens, and I'll list them. They're my next 5 here too. They're just switched, so I have Stevens ahead of Chara. But yeah, you're my top 20, and I agree with you. Like, for the most part, that Stevens pick is just baffling to me. That's just a baffling pick to me. But
you said Stevens was in yours. Oh, you just think that Niedermayer's higher? Okay.
Sorry. So to start off my list, at number 20, I have the one and only, the master of the hip check, Rob Blake. Long career, was the face of the Kings for a long time. Finally got his due with the Avs. 777 points, Stanley Cup, Norris winner, 4-time All-Star. Just a guy I think epitomizes 90s hockey for a defensive defenseman. Could do it all. Could score. Had that big one-timer, massive slap shot. NHL hits legend as well. Huge legend in that game. At number 19, I have good old Duncan Keith. So Derek, you'll be happy with that one. Top 100.
I don't even have Duncan Keith on mine.
Top 100 player all time according to the Hockey Hall of Fame. Listen, I mean, like, the last few years have not been kind to Duncan Keith, but when Duncan Keith was good, Duncan Keith was pretty much one of the greatest of all time to ever do it. I mean, 610 points, not really a points guy, pretty much half of his career games almost, but 3 Stanley Cups, Conn Smythe, 2-time Norris, 3-time All-Star. And this day and age, to be recognized twice as the best defenseman, you got to give it to him. Also, Conn Smythe, that just gives you another notch up in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, pretty much people always look at Kane and Taves and give Crawford a little bit of credit in that mini dynasty they had there. But over those 5-6 years of dominance, I think Keith was probably the most valuable player in that franchise. But yeah, I mean, just a guy I have a ton of respect. Derek, we've always had the debate of who's better, him or Chara. I think now that time has gone on, Chara's edged him out a little bit more. But you got to give him his credit. He's one of the greats. What were you going to say? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, I think if you gave me the option, now I'll do a little spoiler, I guess. I don't have either Chara or Keith in my top 10 here.
Blasphemous.
Or my
you
top
said
20.
top 10 again.
Jeez,
it's a drinking game now, Derek.
I can't count. Either way, I don't have Keith or Chara in my top 20, but I think if you kind of looked at it, when Keith was at the when the Hawks were winning cups, there was no better defenseman in the league than Duncan Keith. And it showed, like you said, the Norris trophies, the Conn Smythes, his international accolades. He was dominating with Team Canada as well. So for that reason, it's like, if you were to be like, whose prime is better? Like if I was building a hockey team and like you get to choose between prime Keith and prime Chara, I take prime Keith every single time. I think with the way the last couple of years of his career has kind of turned out, if you were to be like, who had a better career overall, I would probably say Chara.
Yeah.
But if you give me that prime option, I'm taking prime Keith every single time.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with you there. I think at their peaks, Duncan was probably the more dynamic player, but I think if you're talking longevity, you have to give it up to Chara. This next one might scratch a few heads, but in my opinion, over the last 10 years, there hasn't been a better defenseman, and that'd be Erik Karlsson at number 18. 603 points, 700 games, almost a point per game career guy. 2 Norrises, should probably have 4. I mean, no disrespect to Drew Doughty, no disrespect to Brent Burns, but Erik Karlsson was the superior player in those years. 4-time All-Star. He'll probably have a few more. It's a shame he's stuck on San Jose because they're kind of an irrelevant franchise, so he's not going to get his due. But probably the greatest cent of all time. I mean, to me, over the last 10 years, there's been no better defenseman. He's consistently, if not the top guy, he's been around that mark. I mean, you're talking about the last 10 years, who are the best 5 players. The only 2 guys I could come up who are better than him. And if you want to throw Ovechkin, you can in there. But I think Ovechkin at this point in the last 10 years has been a one-trick pony. But Crosby, McDavid, Karlsson, I don't think there's any player better than him. And even those 2 being ahead of him might be a bit of a stretch for some people. So he's 18th all time, and he's still got another 10 years left, in my opinion.
I'll tell you that I had him right after my honorable mentions. He was that cut, so he was like my 26, I guess you'd say.
So dynamic offensive player, great defensive presence as well. Not overly physical, but not really a guy who gets pushed around at all. Just full of technique, full of skill. I just don't think there's a guy, especially in this era, who's been any better than him. And then, like,
injuries too.
What was that?
Tough injuries he suffered as well.
Yeah, he's a franchise guy. If you have him on your team, you just know that you're gonna get top echelon play from him. But like I said, in my opinion, he's a 4-time Norris guy, and obviously the records won't show that, but he probably should have 4. And to be in that kind of category for a 10-year span, I think you deserve some credit. 17, 16, the exact same as Beda's, just switched. I have Zdeno Chara at 17 and Scott Stevens at 16. Stevens, a monster, probably the most feared player the last 30, 40 years. Almost 1,000 points. Just kind of reiterating what Beda was saying, 3 cups, Conn Smythe, 5-time All-Star. If there was a guy who could ever turn the tide with a hit, it was Scott Stevens. Ended some of the most illustrious careers. Just ask Mr. Eric Lindros. If it wasn't for him, he'd probably be a top 20 player himself. But unfortunately, injuries got the best of him, thanks to Scott Stevens. And then, Chara, just a man amongst boys. He was one of the greats, 656. Maybe if Mr. Bobby Orr didn't exist, he'd be the greatest Bruins defenseman of all time. Who knows? You could probably make an argument for Mr. Brad Parker too, but I don't think he's on any of our lists. Norris, 7-time All-Star, and not to be outdone, the Mark Messier Award for Best Leader in hockey. So there you go. Blake, Keith, Karlsson, Chara, Stevens. That's my first 5. Go ahead, Mr. Derek.
Yeah, okay. I like a lot of good picks in there. Beda, I liked your Angelo Ruggiero pick. I thought, like, the goalies list, I thought we were doing the best NHL goalies of all time, or best NHL defensemen of all time. I don't remember anyone saying that. I need to take a page out of Robbie's book and go to sleep during this podcast, I think. But Yeah, so Angelo Ruggiero, that's a great pick too. I got some similarities going on here. My number 20, I have the only active player on my list, which is Erik Karlsson. A lot of the same things that Robbie said. I think Robbie really, he kind of touched on the fact that he should have 4 Norris trophies, and I completely agree. And I think one of the things that kind of cements that is, in 2015-16, I don't know. I feel like the NHL and the hockey media just kind of decided that Drew Doughty deserves this Lifetime Achievement Award, and we're just going to give it to him in this year. So I don't understand the voters' mindsets when you vote for Drew Doughty as the best defenseman of all in the league, and then you vote that Erik Karlsson finishes higher than him in Hart Trophy voting. So like that right there is like, yeah, how do you not win the Norris Trophy, but you're the highest ranked defenseman in Hart Trophy voting? So I'm not really sure what happened there, but yeah, Erik Karlsson, unbelievable puck moving defenseman, probably the most talented defenseman in the league. And there's that 2017 playoff run with Ottawa where when he was basically played the whole playoffs on a broken foot. And that one stretch pass that goes over the top of everybody to Stone in stride is like literally, that's like honestly looks like a quarterback hitting a wide receiver just in mid-flight. It was amazing. And and you can kind of highlight some plays like that, but he did stuff like that all the time. Every time he touched the puck, it was gold. People also always kind of like harp on his like defensive side of the game, but it's like we're talking about like he's also a player that has had seasons with over 200 blocked shots and stuff. Like he can play defense. It's just in a way, like the best way for Erik Karlsson to play defense is to have the puck, and when you have the puck, that's the other team can't score. So that's kind of the philosophy in there. So Karlsson gets my 20 spot. He's the only active guy. I thought about having Keith and Chara on as well. Realistically, those are the only 3 guys I kind of considered amongst active players to be in there. And for the rest of my list too, those were the only 3 guys that I kind of considered that weren't in the Hall of Fame, which I think kind of makes sense. So when you're talking top 20, there's going to be a lot of Hall of Famers in there. There's just not enough active guys or guys that have recently retired, I feel, to kind of warrant the top 20 discussion. Anyways, moving on. 19, I have Al MacInnis, the ultimate, even before Zdeno Chara, the ultimate hardest shot champion. And that's back with hitting like 102, 103 miles an hour with a wooden stick is insane. It's one of those things where I kind of would love to see at the NHL skills competition. We should do a hardest shot, but it's like after the hardest shot competition, you give the guy that wins a wooden stick and just see the difference. I think it would be fun. That'd be a fun little added thing. We should do every year. It should be the skills competition. You have to do it now, and then you have to bring out somebody to do it in equipment from like the 80s, and just to see what the difference is.
Because didn't St. Louis just host the All-Star game, right? And I think he actually came out and took a shot with a wooden stick during the hardest shot. Like I think he came out as a cameo. And
and it was you're right. He did do that. Do you remember what?
It was like it matched his career high pretty much.
The man has a bomb.
Yeah.
Like I remember too. I think there was a game at one point where the start of the game had to be delayed because he put a hole through the boards in warm up or something like that. Or if that's not a true story, I feel like it's like a legend that gets told at some point. But I mean, also too, he's got the Conn Smythe Trophy from the '89 Cup with the Calgary Flames, Norris Trophy winner as well. And he, over the course of his career, one of the few defensemen to rack up over 1,000 points. He ended his career with 1,274. So yeah, there's just plenty of accolades all around. So I have him at my 19. 18, I have Eddie Shore. Very few defensemen have 4 Hart trophies, and Shore is the only guy to do that. So he's he was an absolute dominant force in the NHL in the 30s. He was the best player in the league, and he was a defenseman. Won 2 Stanley Cups. Kind of I would say, as far as his reputation goes, he's probably the scariest player of all time. Like I know we're kind of talking about, you didn't want to dump the puck into Scott Stevens' corner. You were mindful to not cut across the blue line with your head down if Scott Stevens was on the ice. And I feel like, you read some of the stories about Eddie Shore, and it seems like he's kind of a psychopath, and even in comparison to Scott Stevens. And, he was just one of the most terrifying players to ever play against. Obviously, part of that too is, the dark side of that is, he did things like that ended guys' careers, most notably Ace Bailey, which did lead to the creation of the NHL All-Star game. But, he is a Hall of Famer for Hart trophies and stuff. It was like, he played on the edge a lot, but, there's definitely moments that he jumped over that edge and crossed the line. But, still deserves his place in the history of the NHL. It was just, like I said, guys like him and Sprague Cleghorn back in the day, it was like you wouldn't be able to, we were saying it's like you wouldn't be able to hit like Scott Stevens in today's day and age. And it's like, you certainly wouldn't be able to do anything like guys like Shore and Cleghorn did. But that's what kind of
let the big boys play kind of thing back then.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. And it was like the police didn't have as much of a presence at hockey.
I have to say, Eddie Shore is much, much higher on my list.
Yeah,
Likewise.
Eddie Shore much higher. Eh?
Likewise.
Much higher.
Yeah.
It's surprising coming from you, Robbie, and your bias to.
Well, I was kind of thinking about that because I was just like, man, the four Hart trophies is obviously a big.
And you have to think if the Norris existed back then, would have
won every year.
Well, he would have won it every single year. Yeah. Well, I think that is like, yeah, he would have won it every. He's the best of his era, without a doubt. Without a doubt, he's the best player, period, in any position of that era. But I think I'll kind of go with like going with a little bit of the arguments that Robbie used when we were doing the goalie list. Man, it's like some of those statistics. Yeah, exactly. I wonder. We gotta dive into his era adjusted and and all that. So yeah, I kind of have him slotted there. My 17, I have Borje Salming. A lot of the same reasons that Beda already mentioned, mainly the first European superstar in the game. He also has a lot of Leaf franchise records. I don't think Beda mentioned this when he was talking about him, but he still holds the record for the most assists in Leafs franchise history, as well as the most goals by a defenseman in.
Yeah, he said both of those.
Oh, did he have both of those? God, all right, man. I am not. This is not going well. All right.
I'm glad you listened to me when I speak there.
Well, you know what? That's cool. All right. So we already talked about Borje Salming. So anyways, moving on.
Hey, those records are so nice. You got to repeat them twice, there.
Yeah. Tell it to me again.
All right. So yeah. So anyways, Borje Salming, and also, did you mention the fact that he has a lot of scars on his face? And did you mention that? Did you mention that he was from Europe?
You did. Yeah, I think that
he did mention that. That is his numbers retired by the Leafs. Did you mention? Oh, damn. All right. Yeah. You know what? Just go back and listen to what Beda said. He can explain why Borje Salming's good, way better than I can, anyways. I have number 16. You guys might have this guy a little bit higher on your list too. I have Chris Pronger.
Wow.
He again, one of the more feared players in his time. Excellent defensively. Was also capable of putting up the points. His 2000 season is unreal. It's one of the best seasons by a defenseman in recent memory, and obviously, he walked away with the Hart Trophy for that. One Stanley Cup, one Norris. Kind of in that sort of same echelon as Stevens, whereas like, if you're coming up to the offensive zone and you were trying to dump the puck in, you're probably not choosing Chris Pronger's corner to dump that puck in. He was a player that was really good at playing like on that edge without necessarily going over it. Although of course he does have some incidents where he did cross that line and go over it. And yeah, it's a kind of a shame that his career kind of ended a little prematurely with his eye injury there. But so I'm going to lock in Chris Pronger as my 16. So again, to recap, would have Carlson at 20, McInnes at 19, Shore at 18, Salming at 17, and Pronger at 16.
You've already listed off 2 of my top 10 guys.
2 of your top 10 guys. I'm guessing that's Shore and Pronger.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But hey, to each their own.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Beda.
Some of us have Scott Niedermayer at like 25, so.
21.
Hey,
we already confirmed that I haven't been paying attention to what you were saying. So.
All right, so we're doing 15 down to 11 then, I suppose, now, right? Okay. So kicking off this quarter of the debate, 15, a little bit of an older guy. Not sure if maybe you'll have him down the line, but you probably will, maybe around the same place I do, but Pierre Pilote.
Have him the exact same place.
15, beautiful. I mean, like 3 Norrises in a row Seals the
I have
deal,
him.
quite frankly.
That's weird. I have him so much higher.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
Higher than Eddie Shore. Interesting.
I have him. Well, I mean, I haven't said Palat yet, so obviously he's higher than Eddie Shore. But
Blows
yeah,
my mind.
I have him a lot higher than that actually.
Either way, Plot passed away just a few years ago, age 85. Good old boy from Eastern Quebec. Passed away in Barrie in 2017 there. But yeah, 13 years with the Blackhawks and one final year with the Leafs. Great couple years post expansion. 7 years he was captain of the Blackhawks. So a lot of people, of course, Blackhawks in the 60s synonymous with Hull, Nikita, Hall. But Palat has to be that fourth guy. If you got Glenn Hall, you got one of the greatest goalies of the era, and then two of the greatest scorers, Nikita and Hall, very innovative with the curved sticks and shooting and just dynamic playmaking. Palat's so sound on the blue line. 8 times he was selected to the postseason All-Star team, 5 of them as a first team, 3 of them as a second. Had 59 points in 1965, the year that they went 7 in the Cup Finals and lost to Montreal. Montreal showed them how it was done in Game 7 as well. Beliveau, 14 seconds in, thank you. But yeah, just under 500 points in just under 900 games, so pretty sound career. 1,251 penalty minutes, very sound for defenseman of the era. He didn't take any bullshit. He could tussle his way into a scrap. No one really wanted to mess with him in the corners either. Just the fact that undisputed best defenseman in the league, kind of from the 63 through 65, three-peating right in the mid 60s. Post Harvey, pre Aura era, fit the bill very soundly. Much love to Harry Howell winning in 1967, but he's not turning up anywhere on my list, as do a few other Norris winners. But yeah, if you win 3 in a row, you got to be considered for something. And also, when you really just watch him play a couple of old original 6 games out with Blackhawks, he does lead a pretty good counterattack, and he's so stoic on the blue line and playing with his partner Moose Vasco, who also got a couple All-Star team nominations in the 60s. Blackhawks were a pretty feared force back in the 60s, winning the Cup in 61, of course, runner-up in 62, 65, and then by the time he was gone, they had a couple more finals appearances in the early 70s as well. But yeah, Pilot, 15. Glad to hear that he's on your list, Robbie, at 15, and Derek down the line as well. 14 was Derek's number 19 pick, Al McInnes. Pretty much what?
I got him in the exact same spot too.
No kidding. Well, that's fantastic. That's good to hear. But yeah, I don't really need to elaborate too much more. Derek did hit the nail on the head. 1,274 career points, class of 07. So
you should elaborate more, just because I did Salming twice, so now you should.
Yeah. Did you say that he had a really hard slap shot and he used a wooden stick?
No, I didn't actually. I forgot about his slap shot. I thought he was known for his backhand more than anything, to be honest with you.
Backhand from the point. That was Gordie Howe's last career goal, a backhander from just a couple feet inside the blue line on the Habs. But yeah, class of 07, same year that Stevens went in the Hall of Fame. So it's kind of nice that they have these, legendary defensemen going in. No disrespect to Doug Wilson and Kevin Lowe going in together this year, but that's nothing compared to the Stevens McInnes class or a couple other classes, which we'll mention later down the list. But yeah, 13 years pretty much with Calgary and then 10 with St. Louis. So he was there, the 2 teams he played with, as a veteran of the lineup, and retiring shortly after he was 40. 7-time All-Star, won the Conn Smythe, as you said, the lone year that the Flames won the Cup, and they were pretty loaded with talent as well in 89, of course, many good notable names of Hall of Famers and borderline Hall of Famers. McInnes getting the nod as the Conn Smythe winner says a lot. He's in the top 100, according to the NHL top 100, hardest shot in the league. Tied Bobby Orr's OHL record by goals for defensemen, 2 OHL championships and a Memorial Cup. So pre-NHL days, was banging it hard in the junior leagues. Won in the 2002 Salt Lake City Olympic gold. He was on that team. Canada Cup in 91. So yeah, he transcended decades, 80s, 90s, early 2000s. He was making noise in every which way. And number 2 retired by the Blues, and his jersey is also honored by the Flames. Career-ending eye injury, unfortunately, in 2003. Halfway through that season. But yeah, got to show a lot of love to Al. 13, we've got Brian Leach. We were joking about Brian Leach and Reggie Leach. Names not spelled the same at all, no relation whatsoever. But yeah, Brian Leach, definitely pretty strong resume, as we were saying. Inducted to the Hall of Fame in 2009. Born in Texas, born in Corpus Christi, so not really known as a hockey town, but the pride of New York, I guess, from his time in the league in the late 80s through the early 2000s. Two-time Norris winner in the 90s, so that's pretty tough, like especially all the good 90s defensemen that we've already mentioned, or I'm sure will mention down the stretch. For him to win two Norrises spaced 5 years apart means that he was good for so long. It wasn't just like a back-to-back or a 1 year off. 92 and 97 Norrises sandwiched with a 94 cup and heavy presence in the playoffs for the Rangers for all those years does show that he had some longevity to a career. Also in the top 100, pretty much most of these guys down the stretch are in the top 100 now of the NHL ranking. First ballot Hall of Famer as well for Brian Leetch, two-time first-team All-Star both years that he won the Norris. 3 other years he was a second team, including the 94 year that he won the Cup. All-rookie team in 1989 after he joined the league. Won the World Cup with America in 1996, pretty legendary team there. He kind of was showstopper on that team. 6 years he was voted the Rangers MVP, the team award. Still has Rangers record for assists, goals by defensemen, points by defensemen, single season assists, single season points, power play goals by defensemen. So all the big boy defenseman records. He is pretty much the greatest Rangers defenseman to ever skate at Madison Square. Also about 0.8-ish, 0.85-ish points per game down his career. He had over 1,000 points in 1,200 games and very few penalty minutes in relation, only 571. So a bit of a clean player, pretty well respected, American-born beauty, career high 102 points in 1992. So anytime a D-man cracks 100, you know it's something special, even though that was an era of high inflated goals. But gotta show love to Brian Leetch at 13. Number 12, oh my God, my notes are always mixed up, but here we go, excellent. Don't want to throw that out just yet. Number 12, I have so much love for Larry Robinson. You mentioned Serge Savard was in your honorable mention. Larry Robinson, to me, like, it's tough because I mean I love the guy. He's one of my favorites of all time. I'm like, could I justify putting him in the top 10? I think you can. I think I could.
I found a way to justify him being in the top 10.
Same.
I mean, if you look at his resume,
and you're a Habs fan.
Yeah, I am a Habs fan. That's the thing is, like, part of me was like, I do love him as a player, like individually. Like, there's so many Habs players that are amongst my favorite players of all time, including Lafleur, Cournoyer, both Mahovlich brothers from that 70s team, of course. And Larry Robinson, yeah, like Robinson, Lapointe, and Savard, I almost equate them in the same light. Robinson gets the edge. Like, Lapointe and Savard aren't on my list, nor did they even make my honorable mentions, which says a lot because was it your list, honorable mention, Robbie? You said Savard, yeah. And because he's worthy. He was on a couple All-Star teams and
point was right there too.
Numerous All-Star teams. Larry Robinson is the only one who walked away with individual hard way, so he gets the nod from me to make the list. And 12, I think, was pretty fair. I mean, I thought if I did put him in my top 10, you might have squealed that it was kind of biased. That's good to hear that he's probably in yours.
No, you're allowed to put Larry Robinson in your top 10 and not have us think you're a biased Habs fan.
Good. Well, yeah, I wasn't too worried about that either. But yeah, Larry Robinson, I mean, big bird.
Robbie only yells at you if you put the Rocket in the top 10.
Well, that's fair.
You're not going to like my number 4 pick then. Rocket Richard. Do that. Yeah, Larry Robinson, for his size at the time, 6'4", 225. He wasn't like, he was feared when he had to hit. He hit, like, obviously put Gary Dornhofer through the boards there in that game in the 76 finals, which basically that hit alone told the Flyers your years of championship hockey are done. It's time for the Habs to take back over throughout the rest of the 70s. Larry Robinson delivered the hit. Top 100, of course. All 20 years he played in the league from 72 through 92, made the playoffs. His last 3 years he played with Gretzky's Kings. And though they couldn't win any cups there, he still was on, I guess, 6 cup teams, 73, 4 in the late 70s, and 86. He was on that team. He left the Habs right after they lost to the Flames in 89. But yeah, like, just a huge presence. Started rocking the bucket midway through the 80s for safety purposes. Thank you, Larry. He totally had the grandfather rule in his favor, but he was like, I'm going to wear this bucket because my hair isn't as curly anymore as it used to be. 3-time first-team All-Star, 3-time second-team All-Star, so there's 6 All-Star selections, 2 Norrises, and 77, the year that the Habs arguably had the greatest team of all time when they went 68-12 and then went 12-2 in the postseason. Definitely one of the greatest teams, swept the Cup Finals. He was the Norris winner, and then also in 1980, so the year that we watched that All-Star game, he was in that All-Star game, scored that first goal, the bullet Antonio, who would go on to win the Norris that year as well. 3 other times he was a Norris runner-up, all-time leader in plus-minus, which is huge. I mean, that's a stat that could tip him in the top 10 for me, but I'm happy with putting him at 12 though. But yes, plus 722. That also goes a lot to show team efforts too, because his D partner and his forward lines are just scoring at will, especially when those late 70s Habs teams were beating teams by pretty much an average of 3-4 goals a game. Career high 85 points that year that he won his first Norris in 77. Just a dope guy, man. He got his 10th ring through affiliation with the Blues, and they're one of the best interviews. And where's this ring going on your finger now? It's the only finger that doesn't have one. He's like, right here, because this one's for Boston. I love it, man. Even to this day, he still grinds hard with the Bruins hate. And then at 11, I think Robbie, I'm not sure if you made a comment about probably not having him in our list, but I do have Brad Park at 11. I show a lot of love to Brad Park. Summit Series, really, really brilliant in the Summit Series. Still a young guy as well. He's only about 23, 24 during the Summit Series. Still early days for his Rangers career. Brad Pack was watching the box set a couple months ago of the 72 Summit Series and watching him kind of lead rushes from the back and playing puck behind the net, kind of matching wits with the Soviets. He played mind games. He was kind of a shit disturber, but also just a brilliant D-man. Went into the Hall of Fame in 1988, so shortly after he retired. He did play a little snippet with the Red Wings after he was with the Bruins, but part of that huge blockbuster trade in 75 with Esposito and Rattel, of course, when he went to Boston. Second overall pick in 1966 by the Rangers. Considered one of the best defensemen of his generation for sure. So I do have I equate him equally with Boston as I do New York, maybe a little bit more New York because that was more of his peak in his heyday. But yeah, Leach and Park, undisputed best Rangers defenseman in my opinion of all time. In the top 100, of course. 7 years with the Rangers, 8 years with the Bruins. First team All-Star 5 times, 2 times second, 6 times he was the runner-up for the Norris because he's playing in an era with Robinson and Potvin and Orr, who we'll get to a couple more of those guys later. 13th all-time defenseman scoring, first ballot Hall of Famer, 896 points in 1,100 games, so he's pretty much 0.8 point per game. Also about 1,500 penalty minutes because he could set the tone. There's that great game we watched. Or have you seen that? Yeah, you guys came over. We watched that game with the Jockman and Plant and Perrant's mask getting tossed in the crowd. Yeah, Brad Park had a good little tussle with Daryl Sittler, and then they both left the box to join the bench brawl that ensued a couple minutes later. Just a pretty fun guy to watch. He puts his arm around Vern Buffy, the referee. 82-point career high in 1974. And 5 points in all 8 of the Summit Series games. So he was a huge staple on the D for that. And retired as all-time leader in Rangers defensive scoring and second all-time for Boston defensive scoring. And when he retired in 1985, he was the last active player from the 60s because it was becoming a young man's game. But I do love Brad Pack at 11.
All right, well, hey, I don't think I need to take up too much time because pretty much your list is my list.
Mm-hmm.
15, Pierre Pilote, same reasons. 3-time Norris. I don't need to repeat. I think we both got that right. Apparently, Derek has him much higher. Which, hey, 3 Norrises. How many guys have that? It's really only a handful.
I have him higher, but it's not even 3 Norrises. He's one of only 3 players to win 3 Norrises in a row too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Behind Doug Harvey and Bobby Orr.
Right. Yeah, all-time great. Really can't really say much more than what Beda said. 14, Al McInnes, so we had those the exact same. I had McInnes, I was originally having him at my 19-20 spot when I planned out my top 10 according to how I wanted to do that. And then the next 10 were much tougher. But then I realized, over 1,200 points. The guy was an icon of his era, won a cup with the Flames, was really one of the reasons why St. Louis was really able to turn around as a franchise and just have that long stretch of success. Although they didn't win a cup, they had that long stretch of playoff success where they were able to at least make the playoffs. Just always a team was synonymous with being a good team when he was with them. At 13, I think, Beda, you had him at 12, but at 13, I had Brian Leach.
Leach. Oh, no. I had 13 Leach as well. Huh.
Oh, okay. I thought sorry. Yeah. Sorry. I apologize. I messed that up. At 12, I have Brian Leach. So I messed that up there. I was just looking at your list instead of my list. So at 13, I have one of the most influential players of all time, 8-time All-Star, 4-time Lady Byng winner, Norris winner, 800 plus points, 8-time Stanley Cup winner, Red Kelly. I have him at 13. I think he's just, at first, I wasn't going to have him on my list because he did play center with the Leafs, but obviously the majority of his career he was known as the defenseman. And if we did a top 20 centers of all time, just for the sake of it, I'd probably have him on that list as well. One of the great stories in NHL history, one of the great ambassadors NHL's ever had, hockey's ever had, period. Done so much for the league. I mean, it's self-explanatory. He's done everything. He's won everything. He's the boss. He's the man. 12, I have Brian Leetch. All the same reasons Beda said. And at 11, I have Chris Chelios. So just outside of my top 10. Chris Chelios.
I have Chelios in the exact same spot.
Yeah.
A
guy who played forever. 24 seasons or something like that. Incredible longevity. 3 Stanley Cups, 3 Norrises, 7-time All-Star. Also won that fabled Marc Messier Award. He's a guy that for the first half of their careers, I think a lot of people would have taken Chelios over Lidstrom. Obviously, Lidstrom would go on to be just an all-time great, but in his own right, not that he wasn't at that point. But when they were on Detroit together, there was always that debate of whether who was really making who better. But Chris Chelios, I mean, every team he played for, he made better. Every team he played for, he was in somewhat of a leadership role. Just a guy who's had so much success throughout his career, so much playoff success everywhere he went. Pretty much he won. And I always remember him as, just because of when we were born, but as a Red Wing. And as a Red Wing, he was one of the most ferocious players on the ice and one of the most well-respected as well. I want to say about Brad Park, I was going to put Brad Park very high on my list. And then, like I said about McInnes, as I started going down, I wanted to give guys who had the points and the hardware the edge over a guy like Brad Park, who, yes, all-time great, but was never quite the best of his generation. And you already alluded to it when you're playing second fiddle to Potvin or Robinson. Nothing wrong with that. Those guys are all-time greats. But, I mean, that has to be something to said when you're always playing bridesmaid and you're never the bride.
Yeah.
I can't put you in my top 20. But I didn't even have him in my honorable mention. As soon as you said him, I was like, I'm an idiot for not at least having him in my honorable mentions. But yeah, 11, Chris Chelios. So to recap, Palat, McInnes, Leetch, Kelly, Leetch, Chelios. So those are my next 5.
I'll tell you right now, if Derek says Chelios is his number 11 as well, I'll just tell you that he's my number 10. So I was going to kick it off the next round. Don't really need to say anything on that statement. Yeah, I mean, also all-time leader in playoff games, Chris Chelios is 266. Unreal.
Yeah, everywhere he went, they won. So
yeah. He just gets
most
into
most
my top
games
10,
played by defensemen
so
too,
close.
just regular season games played. Yeah, it's top 10 points as well. Like I think like it's interesting seeing like some guys that do actually manage to show up in kind of the same area. Unlike mine, which apparently I am on a completely different wavelength than you guys with your 15 to 11 spots. So other than Chelios, I might have to explain a bunch of these. Anyways, moving on. So 15, I have Scott Stevens. We've kind of dove into why Scott Stevens deserves the his spot on this list already, and I don't really want to continue to dive into that.
We're close. I mean, I have him same as Beda, like 7.
Yeah, I have him slightly higher than both of you guys, but not like out of the
a place or
number
two.
14. Yeah. Number 14, I actually have Rod Langway. I know you guys have mentioned honorable mentions and stuff for him before. I think to me, Langway is probably one of, if the best pure defensive defenseman of all time here. He won as I kind of said at the start of the show here, it's like the Norris Trophy is something that typically goes to guys that put up a lot of points as defensemen. It's like you kind of look through it, like even like in recent years, like the guys winning Norris trophies in the NHL are, guys like Carlson, Burns, Doughty, like the guys that are putting up those enormous point numbers. And that's kind of been a trend that has gone on through history. So, Rod Langway winning 2 Norris trophies and just barely kind of cracking over 60 points over the course of those 2 seasons, 3 goals in his first Norris Trophy year. Like, the league at that point is just awarding his pure defensive ability. And, he was damn near impossible to score on the Washington Capitals or the Montreal Canadiens when he was on the ice. He did win a Stanley Cup with the Montreal Canadiens early on in his career. Got to learn under guys like Larry Robinson, Serge Savard, and then was, shipped over to the nation's capital to play with the Washington Capitals there. And the thing is like the thing that I was debating about whether to even put Langway on the list, but then I found one stat that I was like, all right, like this, I'll put him up there. This is like before Langway arrived in Washington for the 1982-83 season, Washington had never made the playoffs in their franchise's history. And they finished with 338 goals against, which was 3rd worst in their conference at the time. Langway showed up, and immediately they became a playoff team. Langway was able to cut down. So 82-83, their goals against was 283rd, which put them they went from the 3rd worst team in their conference to the 4th best team in their conference. And then in 83-84, the second year that Langway won his Norris Trophy, they allowed 226 goals against, which was the best in the league. So it's like in 2 years, Langway winning Norris Trophy, he cut, like we said, they're called defensemen. They're not like offense men or like scoring men or something. Your job is defense. Some guys, like I said with Carlson, sometimes the best defense is to have the puck. Sometimes it's blocking shots. Sometimes it's taking away shooting angles and stuff. And to see that in the 2 years that Langway showed up, that the Capitals went from being just a horrendous franchise to cutting their goals against by over 100 in 2 years, and then going on a steady run where Langway never misses the playoffs with the Washington Capitals is, to me, it's very impressive, and he deserves my spot on that list. Also, bonus for being clearly the best hockey player in the history of Taiwan. So he gets that bonus on there because there's very few, there's not a whole lot of guys on this list that can claim that they're the best defenseman in the history of their country. And Langway can do that, though. So best player in the history of Taiwan. So I give it to Rod Langway. Number 13, I do have another gentleman that you guys were, previously saying didn't quite make your list. So I was going with Serge Savard. Obviously, he was the D partner with Larry Robinson there. Created made kind of famous the Savardian spinorama. He was a key cog in the Montreal Canadiens, their dynasties in the 70s. He won 7 Stanley Cups, tacked on a Conn Smythe Trophy in 68-69, Masterton Trophy in 78-79 as well. That Masterton Trophy, obviously, he had a pretty brutal injury, and he was able to come back for it, and he also kind of altered his style a little bit. He went from being a really offensive defenseman to coming back after that. His leg injury and, going to that more defensive defenseman style. He never won a Norris Trophy, but, it's the era that he kind of played in when you're losing a bunch of Norris Trophies to your teammate that, as we kind of mentioned to in Larry Robinson, I have him in my top 10 personally. And, he's just one of the guys that just won a lot, created a highly used maneuver in the Savardian spinorama that's still used by many guys today, especially Bobby Orr used it all the time to kind of separate himself and stuff too. So there was a lot of guys that were able to, kind of take that inspiration, even while Savard was still playing. And then obviously, it's just a common thing to see a defenseman try to spin away from a forechecker now.
My uncle from Cuba, when I played Pee Wee, he had just got his green card to come to Canada and watched his first hockey game, like we're all 12 years old, whatever. And I played right wing, but there was one move I cut in, and in his limited hockey knowledge, he suggested I spin off the defenseman, cut to the slot.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, a little Savardian spinorama. Like, I'm 12. I'm like, I know it's good. And he's like, what?
Dude, man, like it's one of those things where it's like it's kind of like it's weird to think back to like he kind of created it, but it's like it's such a commonly used thing that you don't like. I feel like, yeah, like you said, like a lot of people might not necessarily think about it, but he was the first guy to do it, and a lot of guys, especially those offensive players, those like guys that are like really offensively styled defensemen that'll probably show up later on our list, guys like Coffey, Bork, and even Carlson. It's like they use that move all the time still. It's like kind of revolutionized your offense, the way an offensive defenseman would play. So that's why I put him at 13, despite you guys having him nowhere on your list, but that's my logic behind it. And moving on, I have I'm sure you guys will maybe make fun of me for having Potvin where he is on this list again. But yeah, so number 12, Dennis Potvin.
Oh, God.
Yeah. I can't tell if that laugh is like I have him nowhere on my list or I have him way higher. On my
Dude, that's just as egregious as Beda not having him as Larry Robinson. That's the exact same.
Our number 12s are all just like beautiful players that deserve more credit.
Dude, there's some good defensemen that have played in the NHL. That's all I'm saying. I think the biggest discrepancy, like I said, I have Palat a lot higher. I have Palat in my top 10, and you guys had Brian Leach kind of in like your 12, 13. So I have Leach in my top 10 too. So that's kind of what pushed Potvin down. But yeah, he's a key cog in the Islanders dynasty. Probably
wasn't he ever?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, yeah, he was a very key cog in that Islanders dynasty.
God.
Yeah, 4 Stanley Cups, 3 Norris trophies. Yeah, there's a clear justification to have him in the top 10, which I'm sure you guys will kind of elaborate and go into a little bit later.
Your list is all over the place, my friend.
It is. There's different ways to value defensemen, man. There's different ways.
Eddie Shore, 18. Dennis Potvin, 12. Ron Langway, 14. Taiwan, best hockey player. I love you, Derek.
It is, man. It's true.
Oh my God.
I know. You guys are probably gonna rip on at least one more pick on this list, anyway. So yeah.
Howie Mack.
Howie Mack should be, man. I'm disappointed in you that you didn't put Howie Mack on your list, Beta.
Hey,
you didn't even honorable mention him.
I almost honorable mentioned Harry Cameron just to appease Robbie for his great grandfather.
Yeah, you should. So you know what? I'm gonna pass on the ridicule and stuff, and I'll let you guys, when you get to Potvin, I guess, I don't know, wherever he is on your list, you can explain to me why you have him so much higher than all these guys. And 11, like we already touched on, 11 was pretty weirdly universal across the board with Chris Chelios.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so to recap then, Stevens, Langway, Savard, Potvin, Chelios.
Crazy. All right, Beta, go ahead. Crack open your top 10.
Crack open the top 10, yes. Well, yeah, 10 was Chelios for me. Don't really need to say anything. Both you guys did a phenomenal job explaining why he is just in or just outside the top 10. He belongs there, I think, and that's pretty well agreed upon. The only interesting fact that I don't think either of us have said yet is that he has lost the most playoff games of any North American professional athlete. He's lost 117 postseason games, but believe it or not, only one of those was a Game 7. Only one Game 7 career playoff loss in his 26-year NHL career, whatever the hell it was. To play that many years and to only lose one Game 7, that came in 1985, second round to Quebec when he was with the Habs. I have that game on my laptop. Very good game, a classic game, worthy of watching. The year after the Good Friday Massacre, 85, second round matchup again, Battle of Quebec, went 7, went overtime. Stastny scored about 4.5 minutes in. Steve Penny, very shaky all game long, bum ass, gave way to Patrick Waugh the next year, but that was Chelios' only exit in a Game 7 in his career. So pretty crazy, but yeah, much love to him for all the good he did do. Number 9, I have Chris Pronger, who I look back on and see was Derek's 16, and Robbie has not mentioned him yet, so maybe that means
I
that
have him
will
in
be
the
mentioned
exact
soon.
same spot.
No kidding. Look at
Did you
that.
guys
We're really
make your
clicking
list
there.
together?
We're clicking this time around here, buddy. Yeah, Chris Pronger, man, one of the greatest.
Well, at least I'm here to provide some diversity in opinions for the fine people listening to this.
We're talking about matching classes between Stevens and McInnes getting in the same year. Well, Chris Pronger got in the same year as Nicholas Lidstrom, so two of the greatest defensemen of all time getting in together again. Shout out Kevin Lowe, shout out Doug Wilson. Born in Chad's hometown of Dryden, shout out to Chad Hackle, shout out to Chris Pronger. 6'6", pretty towering figure. His 2000 season, of course, one of the greatest. Many points, 62 points, 14 goals, 48 assists. Just under 700 career points. I'm sure he would have liked to have cracked that if it weren't for his career-ending injury, which looked oh so painful. Over 1,500 penalty minutes. He was suspended 8 times in his career, which I think for a defenseman is kind of blessed. You know, you got to set the tone sometimes, and for him to captain so many teams and take them to the finals and be so imposing, but also not as dirty necessarily as Stevens. How many times was Stevens suspended? I wish I actually knew that off the top of my head, but Pronger had some dirty moments himself. Played for 5 teams, of course, began with the Whalers, then was traded to the Blues, where he kind of really reached his peak, played there for 9 years. Right after the lockout, played 1 year with the Oilers, led them to the Cup Finals, lost, went to the Ducks very next year, led them to the Finals, won, captained them, went to the Flyers for just 2.5 years, and was captaining them too, went to the Finals 2010 and lost. So, yeah, he was able to get a cup out of it, which is nice. Played with Peterborough Petes in the OHL in the early 90s, very famous career there. Blues are going to retire his jersey next year. Number 44, they will retire, which is pretty nice. Yeah, he's in the top 100, 2 Olympic golds, member of the Triple Gold Club. Won the Cup, of course, in 2007, Hart Trophy in 2000, Norris as well. First defenseman to win the Hart Trophy when he did since Bobby Orr 28 years prior. So, yeah, Chris Pronger at my number 9 spot. Number 8.
Scott Stevens was suspended twice in his NHL career, and neither one of them was for a body check.
No kidding.
He never got suspended for a hit. I'm not really sure. I just pulled up a really quick Hockey News article that says, Stevens was only suspended twice for a total of 4 games, and they were not for hits. So I'm not quite sure what they are actually for, but that's what I found really quickly after you mentioned that.
Pretty sweet, actually. Thanks for calling that up. Number 8, Robbie was worried about this sounding contentious because he played center, but I got Red Kelly. Shout out to Red at number 8. He cracked it. Yes, he is one of the greatest. When you look at that dynasty in the early 50s for the Red Wings, he was a champion on the blue line when they won their 4 cups in 6 years, whatever it was. Yeah, 50, 52, 54, 55. Then he was traded to the Leafs in 59, I believe. And then the year after that, he played 1 year D for the Leafs, and then they moved him up to forward. And then bang, they win 4 more cups in the 60s, and he retires in 67. 20-year career, just passed away last year. Was amazing to say that I got to meet him, work an event with him at the age of 91. Shout out to Red. Born in Simcoe, good old boy. But 12 years with the Wings, 4 cups with each Wings and Leafs. But if we're speaking from a defensive perspective, when you got guys like Lindsay and Abel and Howe, and then later Del Vecchio in the decade, and Bill Gadsby's on the back there with you as well. Yeah, what a phenomenal career he had. First team All-Star for almost 7 consecutive years. Just 56 he made the second team, but from 50 through 57, 8 straight years he made the first or second All-Star team as a defenseman, which even though there's only 6 teams, he was always a staple as the best or second best defenseman in the league. To win the inaugural trophy, that says so much. To win the first ever trophy awarded to a best defenseman, and guys like Harvey are already on the scene and will soon take that torch and turn it into what is synonymous with being, a pioneering defenseman for this and that and whatever. But Red Kelly to win the first one ever, same year that he would win a cup, speaks volumes to his legacy. I mean, when he played forward, that beefs up his point totals a little bit, of course. But if we're talking from a defensive perspective, his career high for points was 54 points the year that the Wings had a phenomenal regular season, going 44, 13, and 13, the first ever team to break 100 points in the regular season, though they would collapse in the playoffs and would lose to Montreal, I believe. And then Montreal would go on to lose to the Leafs. That was the Verocco season of 51. But, pretty strong. Yeah, 17 goals, 37 assists that one season, and the first ever Norris. So shout out to Red. Number 7, I've got Eddie Shore. Now here, it's the oldest player I have, dating back, of course. He was born in 1902, so was on the scene in the late 20s, and then just was by far the best. You could argue he was the best player in the 30s. I mean, Howie Morenz was kind of reached his peak right on the cusp of 1930, but Freddie Shore to win 4 Hearts, most of any D-man, MVP of the league 4 times as a D-man, despite his kind of outlandish behavior, ending career so violently as he did with Ace Bailey. It turned out to be a lot of good, though, because they would shake hands and they would go on to set this trend as a benefit game that would lead to an annual All-Star game, which is what Ace Bailey wanted. And Ace Bailey's in the Hall of Fame, too. He's doing well for himself. So Eddie Shore, despite his violence, also Don Cherry played for him when he coached Rochester. You ever see that film, The Wrath of Grapes? And Don Cherry, Keep Your Head Up Kid story? That's the guy who, Jared Keeso, the actor who's in Letterkenny.
Yeah,
a bang up
I've
Don
seen
Cherry.
this, yeah.
And Eddie Shore is a vicious son of a gun who calls Don Cherry Madagascar, and he doesn't bend his knees when he skates. He's like, "Why are you calling me Madagascar?" He's like, "Because that's where I'd send you if I had the choice." Eddie Shore, mean son of a gun, tough coach. 4 Hearts though, yeah, most of any defenseman.
He used to I think Charlie tells a story he used to because he didn't want goalies to drop to their knees to make saves, so he would tie a noose around their neck and then put it on the crossbar, so that they wouldn't drop down. Yeah, so it's
that's
Eddie Shore's a bit of a psychopath, which is why I justifiably dropped him way lower on my list.
Oh, okay.
I think the fact that he's a psychopath makes him a top 10 player. That's
the fact that he is a psychopath. Yeah.
Got to be known for something, eh? Yeah, I mean, they didn't start naming all-star teams until his 5th season in the league, but when they started, he was honored first team in 7 of his last 9 seasons, and it was a second all-star team one time, and the only time he wasn't named to the all-star team, he was gone for half the season because of injury. So every season he was eligible. When they started naming teams, he was on the first team, except one time when he was on the second, and one other time when he was hurt. His second season, he set a league record at the time with 165 PIMs. Born in the Northwest Territories, would you say he's the greatest person born in a territory to ever play in the NHL? I think so. Died in Massachusetts, though, in 1985. Right-handed shooter. Yeah. Played 13 years with the Bruins. In his last year, he was a player coach with the New York Americans, lonely franchise there. 105 career goals. So played a defensive style. Of course, goals were hard to come by in the late 20s, early 30s when they had to introduce the forward pass in the offensive zone. Then they kind of sparked just over 1,000 career penalty minutes in his 12-year career, or excuse me, his 14-year career, I guess that would be. Career high 33 points in 1935, which was one of the 4 years he won the Hart. So he won it in 33, 35, 36, 38. So yeah, just in a 6-year span, he won it 4 times, which is excellent. And yes, of course, the 7-time first-team All-Star. Bruins retired his number in 1947 and was pretty much instantly named to the Hall of Fame in 47, the second year that they really had a class. So he was the next class after the inaugural class. So shout out to Eddie. Went in the same year as Dick Clapper, who got his eligibility waived as soon as he retired. So love Eddie. And then number 6, now obviously it sucks to be named just outside of the top 5 because obviously the top 5 is this last quarter we're doing. So someone obviously like Niedermeyer just had to be outside of it. This could be a little contentious, but my number 6 all time is Paul Coffey. Paul Coffey for me just misses the top 5. And you know what? I hate to do this to him, but one of the main reasons he missed it is because he bounced around way too goddamn much down the stretch. You know, it's kind of like you make a legacy here, you make a legacy here, but when you played for 9 teams in 20 years, it's pretty much you're only lasting, you played.
That's the record, though.
It's not good.
Yeah,
I mean, that is a record. Yeah, sure. I guess I'll take it then. And another infamous pairing of going into the Hall of Fame the same year. He goes into the Hall of Fame the same year as Ray Bourque, who is in my top 5 somewhere. Let's just say that. So yeah, it's kind of nice that they have these pairings of D-man getting in together to really shine a light on their legacies, whether it's, McInnes or Stevens or someone else like Pronger and Lidstrom. But here, Coffey and Bourque get in together. But yeah, Coffey, I mean, has the record for most goals by a defenseman in a single season with 48, which is just outstanding. That's how many that Pasternak and Ovechkin had when the season was cut short by a dozen games as a forward. But Coffey to do it as a D-man, get 48 points, 100 or 48 goals.
A wild time.
Yeah, it was a wild time, and it's great hockey because it was still very physical and you couldn't hide out there. A lot of turnover though. Yeah, it's a shame that he had to play for so many teams, and yeah, like he's got these Hartford stints and ended his career in Boston, and 2000, 2001. It's funny, he went to Boston after Ray Bourque left. But 3 Norrises, career high 138 points, which is just one shy of the defensive record set by Bobby Orr in 1971. One of only 2 defensemen with Orr to score 100 points in a season more than once. He did it 5 times. 5 times he broke 100 points. 7 years with the Oilers, 5 with the Penguins, 1 with the Kings, 3 with the Wings, which he was a part of that team that had 62-game regular season and then choked Donkey Dick in the playoffs. 1 year with the Whalers, 2 with the Flyers, 1 with the Blackhawks, 1.5 with the Hurricanes, and then 1 with the Bruins. So he was kind of just mentoring, which say what you will, but I find that kind of silly when you're just a pawn and used as a mentoring tool when you're kind of washed up down the stretch. But 4-time first-team All-Star, 4-time second, won the Canada Cup 3 times, 84, 87, 91. So the last 3 Canada Cups, he was victorious. Set a record with 9 shorthanded goals the year that he had 48 goals in 85, 86, which was also the year that Gretzky set the assist and points record with 163 and 215 respectively. One of the greatest teams to never win the Cup, that 85, 86 Oilers, thanks to Steve Smith scoring in his own net. Was a plus 26 in the 1985 playoffs. Outstanding. And a playoff, the plus 26, had 37 points that playoff season too, just under 200 career playoff points. 90 assists one year, like just absurd stats. 28-game point streak that same year. Led the league in scoring as a D-man 8 times. Yeah, man. NHL record for most defensive goals, including playoffs, with 455. So Bourque has it regular season, but Coffey, including playoffs, because he played on so many good Oilers teams, the Penguins teams, the Wings teams, has the nod for collaborative goals, 455. Shout out to Paul, but he just gets edged outside the top 5. I guess we'll see if it's contentious, my top 5. But I don't know. I thought it was pretty good to have Coffey there. And I was also kind of bummed that Shore for being so legendary for his time. I'm like, you know what? Represent the 30s. Give him the number 7 spot. Coffey the number 6. What say you, gentlemen?
Well, for my number 10 is a guy you omitted from your list, Mr. Beda. I have Scotty Niedermayer at number 10 on my list.
That's exactly where I have him too.
He's just the guy. I mean, the common denominator between the Devils and the Ducks run, Scott Niedermayer obviously played with some of the 2 greatest in Scott Stevens and Chris Pronger. Pronger's at my 9, so I think we have him in the exact same spot, Beta. But yeah, Niedermayer won everything, and did it so gracefully, did with ease. 740 points, 4 cups, Conn Smythe, Norris, 4-time All-Star. I mean, the consummate professional, consummate leader. I mean, Sidney Crosby tells a fantastic story that when the States tied it up late in 2010 to send it to overtime, Niedermayer was walking around the dressing room like they'd already won the gold medal game. Like everyone was shitting bricks, and he was just walking around in his trousers, just like, yeah, we got this. So, I mean, the confidence, the grace, the ability to put a team on his back, to be consistent, and not necessarily be the guy that everyone points to and said, yeah, he's the guy. He's the reason why this team's winning. I mean, Stevens and Pronger, and even though I have Pronger ahead of him on the list, if you take Scott Niedermayer away from both those guys, or if you take him away from Stevens especially, I don't think Stevens really gets as far as he does, and I don't think the Devils get as far as they do, and I don't think the Ducks win the cup that they win. I think he's just instrumental. He's the common denominator. He's a guy who could do everything and does it with ease. He's won everything. There's really nothing more you can say about him. He's just a stud. I personally, through that stretch of the mid-90s all the way up to the late 2000s, there's 2 guys who I think are the 2 best. And 1A is Nick Lindstrom, who I have very high on this list, and 1B is Scott Niedermayer. So I think those 2 guys, Lidstrom is just unparalleled. I don't think there's anyone better than him. But Scott Niedermayer, just a ton of respect for that guy. And every other NHLer would probably tell you the exact same thing, although I know not. But just from stories from I've heard. At my number 9, I already said it, Chris Pronger. Think of Scott Stevens, but better. And that's exactly what you got in Chris Pronger, just the ultimate leader, ultimate great combination of offense and defense. I mean, a guy in his size, the ability for him to skate the way he does, lay the body the way he does. I don't think we've seen a guy quite like him since he's retired. Just the size, skill, and finesse wrapped all in one, plus the sheer nastiness. The amount of stories you hear of him just being such a dickhead on the ice, off the ice, just trying to keep the locker room in order and trying to keep the order on the ice in check as well. He's a guy who could take care of himself and take care of his teammates while at the same time be a force on offense, be a force on defense, and a lot of poise. A lot of poise with him. So he's my 9. At 8, I have Eddie Shore. I mean, 4-time Hart winner, 2 Stanley Cups. For me,
Yeah, I didn't even mention his cups. That's true.
yeah, he's the guy, right? So, I mean, for that era, there's no one better. I think, to be fair, if you're talking about the undisputed best defenseman of his era, then they have to be pretty high on the list. Derek, it's an absolute disrespectful show you put on here. Disgraceful on your part that he's not even in your top 10. No love for Eddie
Niedermayer's
Shore.
not even in Beda's top 20. He's not even
And
on
that's
the
a
list.
disgrace, too. But Niedermayer was not the undisputed best player of his generation. Eddie Shore was. Eddie Shore is a nasty son of a bitch, but Eddie Shore got the job done. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, baby. You got to win those cups, and you got to do it nasty. And sometimes you got to do what Eddie Shore did.
Work it like that.
And do what you got to do. And if there was a Norris back in those days, he would have won them all day, every day. So he's a guy who deserves so much more respect.
Shout out to Red Horner. You would have been runner-up.
So there's so much disrespect on your behalf, Mr. Derek. Mr. Beda, Niedermayer is spitting on your grave one day, too. At 7, I have Big Bird, Larry Robinson, just outside of my top 6. 958 points, 6 Stanley Cups, a Conn Smythe, 2 Norrises, 6-time All-Star. Beda already mentioned all of his accolades, but I just want to reiterate, just another one of those things, man, where you're talking about the all-time great franchise and one of their all-time great players, Larry Robinson. I don't know if he's their greatest defenseman ever, but he is, in my opinion, their greatest defenseman ever. And I think that shows on my list. Who's their better defenseman, Derek?
Doug Harvey.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I got.
You don't have Doug Harvey on your list?
I know. I forgot about Doug Harvey. Don't play with me.
Well, I feel.
Oh,
so
Doug Harvey's on my
better
list. Derek,
You didn't show
Harvey.
love to Butch Bouchard either.
I forgot about him. But no. So yeah, Larry Robinson. Okay, he is 2 behind Doug Harvey, and if you're 2 behind Doug Harvey, you're doing okay. So, bevy of trophies, bevy of accolades. One of the most respected captains in the history of the NHL. One of the most respected D-men in NHL history as well. He deserves to be higher. The fact that he's not in your top 10 again, Beda, just a lack of respect for your elders.
For Robinson?
For Robinson.
It just sounds like you valued Robinson higher and I valued Red Kelly higher. It sounds like we pretty much just had them in similar places but just swapped.
No, sorry. But yeah, Robinson at number 7. Number 6, I have the one and only, the biggest cog of the cogs. Apparently, he was a minor cog in the cogs.
No, he was a big cog.
The Islanders.
There was other big cogs. He was an equally
And he was the
big
biggest
cog.
one of them all. And this is Dennis Potvin of the New York Islanders. Pretty much a point a game guy. I'm having a lot of trouble saying point per game. He's pretty much a point per game.
I'm having a lot of trouble saying top 20. So it's fair.
Obviously, those 4 cups, 3-time Norris winner, Calder. So from start to finish, he was an elite player, 7-time All-Star. And hey, shout out to the bucket, one of the all-time great buckets too. A guy who ruled the ice, was one of the originators in the big body check. Just a great player. Not quite top 5 material in my opinion, but hey, he's right there. He's like, who did we have just on the outside of each list for our goalies? Was it Glenn Hall?
At
He's
6,
like
pretty much.
he's
Yeah.
like the Glenn Hall of defensemen. He's a great defenseman, but he's just not top 5 material. And that's where I'll leave it off. So,
No, yeah, I agree. He's definitely not top 5 material.
well,
Completely agree with that statement. Yeah.
Derek, just an utter disrespect for great players. Chris Pronger behind Scott Stevens, Serge Savard ahead of Eddie Shore is just an unbelievable travesty. What are these lists? This is disgraceful, gentlemen. But yeah, so who do I got? I got Niedermayer, rightfully so, in the top 10. Anyone who doesn't have them in their top 20 is an absolute buffoon.
Yeah. Probably shouldn't have a podcast talking about hockey history.
Number 9, Chris Pronger. Number 8, Eddie Shore. Big Bird at 7. And then the one and only, the rightful king of the Potvin name, Dennis Potvin at number 6. The floor is yours, Derek.
Well, all right. This will be interesting. As we've apparently my list looks nothing like your guys' list, so this should be a good time. Anyways, number 10, Scott Niedermayer. We've already talked about him a lot. The one cool stat that we haven't mentioned, or I don't think we've mentioned, I have been known to not be, I guess, zoning out or something at certain points of this podcast. But Scott Niedermayer, in addition to all of the accolades that we have already mentioned, one of just 8 players to win an Olympic gold medal, a world championship, a Stanley Cup, a World Juniors, and a World Cup. World Cup / Canada Cup. Anyways, he's one of the only 8 players to do that. So that's, certainly an interesting stat to add to his accolades there. Number 9, I had Brian Leach. So I put him in. I have him in my top 10. You guys have him. I guess Robbie had him 12th. So that's kind of like just outside, I guess. So it's not too far off. A lot of the same things that you guys already mentioned. I guess valued it a little bit higher. Top 10 in points with having 1,028, the 2 Norris trophies, a cup, Conn Smythe Calder trophy as well. So I mean that the trophy case alone, I think, kind of elevates him to that. As we kind of mentioned, he's like, he's probably one of the best player in Rangers history. Like I'm not even like Messier, I think, would be the other guy in the discussion if you want to talk like the best Ranger ever, but like he wasn't really there all that long. So I feel like Leach probably gets the edge on that. Number 8, I had Pierre Palat. That's where I ranked him there. So as we kind of mentioned before, I think the one big thing for me was the 3 Norris trophies in a row was a big thing for me. I think there's a lot of guys on our list that have multiple Norris trophies, but I think like if you win, like you're talking about like certain players being like the definitive, like the best player of your gen. Like if there's guys like Randy Carlyle who had an unreal season and won a Norris trophy, right? So it's like you can win a Norris trophy with one unbelievable season. Even, PK Subban won a Norris trophy with an unbelievable season. But it's like to win like 3 and to actually do it 3 in a row, it's like there's a stretch of time where you are the undisputed best defenseman in the NHL in the league. So if we're going to talk about, some guys being the best defenseman of their era, I feel like Palat kind of solidified himself with that by winning 3 in a row. Part of those some of the best Blackhawks teams in history, teams that are still talked about to this day. Obviously, I believe one of you mentioned the whole thing, the curved sticks with Hull and Mikita, and he was the guy that anchored that D-core back there. Number 7, I have Larry Robinson locked into the same spot that Robbie did. I think we've kind of talked enough about him. Again, a ton of Norris trophies. He hit a guy through the boards once. That's amazing. Top 10 in points, best plus minus, all the cups in the world. There's not really a whole lot else you can say that we've already mentioned. Number 6, this is a little maybe an off the board one. Vyacheslav Fedosov, I placed in at number 6 here. Fedosov, I mean, he didn't get to play in the NHL as long as he possibly should have. Robbie's already shaking his head at this, just already going back and forth, man. You know how I found out about that one stat about Scott Niedermayer? It's because Fedosov is one of the other guys to do it. He was probably the best there's no player in NHL history or in hockey history that has a better international resume when you kind of look at it than Fedosov. I mean, 2 Olympic gold medals, 7 world championships gold medals, 11 world championship medals total, 81 Canada Cup, 3 straight world juniors. Like I said, he's one of the 8 players to win, a Stanley Cup, a Stanley Cup, world championship, Olympic gold medal, Canada Cup, and a world junior. Not a whole lot of guys have been able to do that, but probably without a doubt the best Russian defenseman of all time. And he also played a big role in a lot of the politics in starting to get Russian players to come over. We talk about how Mogilny, as a potential Hall of Famer, that one of the big things that leads him to having that Hall of Fame credentials is that he, was the first guy to defect from the Soviet Union. Fedosov kind of tried to do it legitimately and stuff, but in doing it legitimately, he paved the way for a lot of guys to also be able to do it legitimately. We just kind of got the tail end of what would have been his career in the NHL. And he ended his career with the Detroit Red Wings, who put together one of the most dominant teams in league history through the late 90s there. The Russian 5 line just kind of dominated the league, and he was a big part of that, and ended his career with the 2 Stanley Cups. But obviously, his time in the NHL is short-lived, but I'm putting him there because he's the best defenseman in the history of international hockey, and it's not really even close if you're just looking at international accolades on its own. I cannot wait for you guys to rip into that pick. So I will turn it over to you.
Well, it's just like the rest of your list. It's completely baffling, but hey, I mean, it's one's opinion, and I'm not going to completely bury you for it. But you have Eddie Shore at 18, you have Pronger at 16, you have Search of Art at 13. Your list is in shambles.
It's not in shambles. It's just different than your list.
I like how you said, I think you mentioned to Beda earlier that you thought this was a list of just pure NHL defensemen.
Yeah, I didn't.
And then the majority of Fedosov's career is not in the NHL.
Yeah, but he played in the NHL, so I'm using him to put it on this list. If Tretiak played one game in the NHL, I would have had him in like my top 5 goalies of all time too.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah. I don't mind the Fedosov pick so much, just that like he's so high. Like I don't mind him being in that list, maybe in like the 16 range, but to place him above guys like Robinson and Shore and Palat, which you have quite high. Like I respect that you have Palat so high. The fact that Eddie Shore is 18 on your list and Vyacheslav Fedosov, and his 36 career NHL goals in 550 games.
We've had the conversations at work. I'll put Harlamov in a top 10 when we do if we do top 10 forwards or top 10 players of all time. Harlamov's sitting in that top 10 too.
Derek, are you a closet communist? You just love the Army.
No, I just like the way that they played hockey.
Hey, that's not the Canadian way. Damn it.
It's not, but it's the way to win a ton of international medals, apparently.
Against kids.
Fedosov came back at age 51 to play 1 game there with the Red Army, and didn't see the score sheet. What the hell is his excuse? Waste of a return.
What did Gordie Howe get when he played that one like IHL game for the Detroit Vipers?
Had a 47-second shift at age 69.
He had a 47-second shift. Yeah.
Are you comparing that to what Fedosov did?
Yeah, no, I'm just curious. You know what? He brought it up, and I was like, I'm just curious as to like what Gordie Howe did in that game.
Oh my god.
That was it. He just wanted to say he played a 6th decade of professional hockey.
Yeah, that was actually kind of cool though that they did that.
All right, Mr. Beda. Well, give us your top 5 here, dude.
Well, why don't we kind of do this collaboratively? We all if we all put out our 5th together. Let's do this one step at a time, gentlemen.
Who's
How do you
number
feel?
5?
My number 5 is Podman.
Okay, I had 6. My number 5 is Paul Coffey.
Okay, so we just literally swapped 5 and 6.
Yeah.
That's it.
My
and Derek's is Harry Cameron. Okay.
My number 5 is Brian McCabe.
I was about. Oh my god! I was like, "What the?" I thought you were gonna say Brad Park. I was like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?"
Oh my goodness.
Man, yeah, he had a huge one-timer from the point. It was amazing. No, obviously it's actually Thomas Caberlet who was clearly the better player. Robbie still has no idea what I'm going with on this list. My 5's Paul Coffey too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. I mean, like we've talked about Coffey quite a bit. I guess you guys talked about Potvin quite a bit. I don't have too much to add on Potvin other than, his whole career with the Islanders, first overall pick as well. It's great when the first overall pick pans out. 1973 till 1988, he played just for the Islanders. 4-peated, won at 3 Norrises in the era of the defensemen that I think like 70s and 90s. I mean, some 80s. Basically, like 70s is where we really noticed, holy shit, like these defensemen are coming with that heater. Like they're really setting the tone and the game's taking off in a different kind of direction. And for Potvin to actually get some hardware during the days of Orr and Robinson and those other guys, 76, 78, and 79. So the first Norris post Bobby Orr's 8-peat, he won it. Then Robinson won in 77, then Potvin 78, 79, Robinson 80. So it's pretty much just those 3 guys that entire decade. Jersey number retired by the Islanders, 101-point season in 78, 79, the last year before the WHA merger. 70 of those were assists, so 31 goals, 70 assists, just brilliant stats, and captaining as well, and literally just under a point per game, 1,052 points in 1,060 games, and 1,300 penalty minutes. Seems like he was a very well-rounded player. And you watch these Islanders games, late 70s, early 80s games, you just understand how calm he is on the blue line and leads the power play, and just phenomenal back checking and vicious in the slot, like tying up his forecheckers. So yeah, I do have a lot of love for Potvin at my number 5. So yeah, Coffey, Potvin. It was pretty much either or, but I just thought it's a shame. I just kind of disrespected Coffey just because he played for so many teams, and Potvin is the exact antithesis of that. He was just constant number 1 pick, fulfilled his whole career, and kind of got out of the game when he could have still played. He retired at 35.
The way I looked at it was, it's kind of like our Sawchuk Hall debate, really. It's like, it's what you preference more. Like, both guys pretty much had the same amount of all-star appearances, the exact same Norris trophies, exact same cups, but Coffey's just got 500 more points. Obviously, that's due to the era they played in. But I think Paul Coffey is just maybe the greatest pure offensive defenseman, if you want to put it that way. But yeah, that's the way I'd have it. But yeah, either or. I'm not going to disrespect Dennis Potvin quite like Derek is, but at the end of the day, beggars can't be choosers, right?
Yeah, one of the best offensive defensemen in their day. Shout out to Sprague Clayhorn.
I gave him an honorable mention too. Yeah, I think like Coffey 5'6" gets kind of spot for him. Obviously, he had all the points, all the accolades that he racked up over the course of his career. I don't really see why playing for a bunch of different teams is such a big knock, but Beda, I guess you're really only dropping him to 6, so it's not really much.
Well, it's not like he was cup chasing like
Yeah.
Iginla was, like he already had everything he wanted, but he was just expendable all the time.
Yeah. I think too, like just a little, in a weird way too, just some of like extra like little hockey lore-ness about Paul Coffey too, is he was really famous for like, the Paul Coffey curve on that famous Sherwood stick, which is still like if not close to the highest selling stick of all time, one of the best, most popular curve patterns of all time. You can't really get much of a backhand off of with it. So, but it's, pretty nasty if you just want to throw some saucer passes up and really accurate wrist shot. So it's not surprised to see like, Paul Coffey. When did Paul Coffey retire, Beda? When was
2001-ish, I think?
Yeah. So 2001, Sherwood still sells the Coffey curve in stores. It's like, it is, he's been out of the league for 20 years. He's like, even like Warrior discontinued the Lidstrom curve shortly after he retired. Like that's something that you can't even, that you struggle to find. And it's just like that little extra, I don't know. It's just one of those weird, like, obviously that doesn't really have much to do with like where he would rank all time, but it's just like an extra little of why, like, I think some people kind of view Coffey in like that's such that esteem light and stuff, he still has that impact where it's like, even kids going to, to Sport Check or whatever, go buy a stick now. You can go pick up a coffee curve, even though obviously, when he was dominating the league, that was, 30 to 40 years ago now.
True.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, straight up 35 years ago, that definitely very true.
All right, boys.
So it's like the legacy still of coffee still lives on in ways that, you can't get a Gretzky curve in the store right now, but you can get a Paul Coffey curve.
All right, boys. Who's our number 4?
My number 4, I got Dougie Harvey.
Doug Harvey. Okay.
Died in a boxcar all alone. But what a hell!
You got to bring death into every single podcast, every single point that you make.
What is going on, Mr. Beda? What's happening with you? What's going on?
Curious game. Now, Doug Harvey. Who do you guys have it for?
I've got Ray Bork.
Okay.
I also have Ray Bork.
Yeah. I have, for future's sake, I have Harvey at 3. So again, it's back and forth.
I also have Harvey at 3, and I have a feeling our 1 and 2 are the exact same across the board as well.
Well,
I mean,
weird how this happens. Our lists are completely different right up until 6, and then the 5 is the exact same.
That makes sense, though. Like, I would expect them to be much more different at 16 through 20 than from 1 to 5.
Yeah, the only, I have Harvey ahead of Bork just because perennial.
7 Norris trophies.
Yeah, perennial.
That's literally what I did too. And then
6.
to be honest, I had Bork ahead of Coffey mainly because Bork has the record for the most points by a defenseman. But if you also actually kind of look at it, Coffey played like about 200 less games than Bork. And the gap between them in their point totals is just under 50.
But also, Ray Bork,
so.
his whole entire career, only missed an All-Star game 1 time.
Yeah, exactly. Those were kind of the big reasons. But yeah, and then I agree. Like Harvey, I mean, we could talk about, just how great of a player Doug Harvey is, and obviously he was a key cog in the Habs dynasties in the original 6 era.
From 1952 till 1962, he was on the All-Star team every year. Only one of them was second team, and that was the 1 year in that 7-year Norris that he didn't win it, where Tom Johnson, his defensive partner, got it. So 52 all the way through 58, first team All-Star. 59, second team. Tommy Johnson wins the Norris. 60, 61, 62, back on the first team with the Norrises.
Yeah, and of course, Harvey, much like Pierre Palat, one of just the 3 guys to win 3 Norris trophies in a row. Again, it's just like you're, even to the extent of Eddie Shore, when you win like the 4 Hart trophies, is like you're the best player of your era. And then, you come back to, Doug Harvey here, and it's like he's the kind of the undisputed best defenseman of his era. 7 North Stars, like you said, Beda, only broken up by his teammate and defense partner, which is insane when you really kind of think about it, that Montreal's D was that good. That's, it's tough to see any reason why on any list of the best defensemen, he'd be further down than 3 or 4.
Yeah, those all those All-Star selections, like he very well could have won Norris's prior to his first Norris was the second ever Norris after Red Kelly did in 54. Harvey started his 4-peat in 55. So he could have done 8 in a row. He could have done an or basically if it weren't for Tom Johnson. But yeah, 52 and 53 and 54, he was on the first team All-Star team. And 52, 53 could have very well won the Norris as well. But he made his debut in 47. And of course, he kind of unionized, kind of had that mindset, which wasn't really well received by the owners. And hence, when he was made captain the year after Maurice Richard retired, a lot of Montreal executives were a little weary of that. And then he was traded shortly thereafter and with the Rangers, then came back out of retirement with a quick stint with the Red Wings and then Blues, and officially retired in 69, I believe. But much more of a defensive defenseman, I guess, when you got all those offensive threats for the Habs like they did during their 5-peat. Only had 88 career goals in the regular season, 540 points in 1,100 games. So, I mean, he pioneered some of the ways that you'd break out as well on the counter, like playing the puck from behind the net and kind of carrying it up and centering it around center ice, breaking in over the blue line, dump and chase, power play. They play that 4-1, but Harvey would often be the one and set up shop and kind of circulate the puck around. So yeah, very, very innovative, and he liked to drink.
Nice. That's what's most important. So we named 4 and 3. 3's Bork for you, right, Beda?
No, Bork is 2 for me.
Ooh.
Lidstrom is 3 for me.
No, that's worse than putting Potvin outside your top 10.
No, eat my ass. Like, absolutely not.
That's crazy.
We were talking about Bork only missing 1 All-Star and 19-time selection in 21 years. Leading all the records for goals, assists, and points. For me, I love Nick Lidstrom, and yes, his 7 Norrises are not to be frowned upon, but it's very close. It could have been either or. In fact, I was like, maybe fuck it, I'll just do it because I know you guys are going to have him at 1 or 2.
Close really at all, to be honest with you. I think for 20 years, there was one guy constantly, and yeah, Bork, you could probably say the same thing, but from day one, Nick Lidstrom was on a winning team until the very end of his career, and he was the best defenseman throughout that whole entire generation of Red Wings players, give or take, what your preference is, but 1,142 points, 4 Stanley Cups, Conn Smythe, 7 Norrises, 12 All-Star appearances. The only thing, and I was very close of putting him number 1, the only difference between him and Orr for me was the heart, with the hearts for Bobby Orr. And obviously,
so you are conceding that Orr is your number 1.
Orr is number 1. I
Okay.
just figured that everyone would have Orr number 1, but
Yeah.
But yeah, Lidstrom, international success. Obviously, he's the 1A. He's the perfect defenseman. There is no holes in this game.
Yeah.
0 holes.
Yeah. Like his nickname while he was playing was the perfect human. Like that's literally like the rest of the league was like this guy's flawless.
Yeah.
His defensive positioning was mind-boggling. He, not even that, like he's got over 1,000 points too. Like he's and he probably isn't even like, if you think of like a purely like, he's not an offensive defenseman. Like he's just a great like all-around defenseman, and he still put up those numbers from the blue line. And then you have like some of those like extra little intangible things. First European captain to win a Stanley Cup is up there. Obviously 4 cups with the Detroit Red Wings while winning the Norrises, as Robbie mentioned, or I don't know if he explicitly mentioned it, but he mentioned being on a winning team the entire career, but never missed the playoffs in his entire career with one team with the Detroit Red Wings too. And like I think it's weird because I feel like I had Bork just knocked down, or I guess below, but it's just because like Lidstrom was without a doubt the best player. Like I think as far as like, if you were to cap it and be like from 2000 on, Nick Lidstrom is the best player that has played in the NHL. And I think, even like, I know we were talking a couple episodes ago that like we'd probably put like Crosby at like, there's an argument to be made that he's like 5th all time or whatever. But like, I think like Lidstrom is also a top 10 player of all time to me. Without a doubt. And if he's not better than Crosby, he's 6th, like on your all-time list. I think if you were to go all encompassing positions, if we do that one day, like I said, like when I was a kid, I was a defenseman, and it was like, I just remember this, like growing up, you're like, I want to be Nick Lidstrom. Like that's what you would kind of think, because it's like that was the gold standard there, and it never wavered. And he was, when he retired, you're probably like, dude, you could play another 5 years and still be one of the best defensemen in the league. And yeah, there's just like, I don't know what. Like, if Bobby Orr didn't exist, I don't even think it's an argument to be Nick Lidstrom's the best defenseman of all time. But Bobby Orr exists, so you got to have that argument. But I think too, like, yeah, he does exist. He exists, so you have to do it. But I think even like if you look at like Red Wings history, he's probably behind Howe, and that's it. Like as far as like the greatest Red Wing of all time.
Yeah.
And
he's above Yzerman.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. He played on the same team as Yzerman. Yzerman fully deserved to be the captain of those teams, but yeah, I would have him say he's better than Yzerman. Do you think would you have Yzerman ranked above him, Beda? If you were to just
Either
go
or,
greatest,
really. Like,
just greatest Red Wings of all time.
like I said, like this Lidstrom Bork 2-3 for me is very close. It could have gone either way. I almost like thought of it as a tie, but I gave Bork the benefit just because of the points record and the fact that I valued the team thing less. Like I thought he was all these all-star selections because he played on marginally weaker teams and he wasn't always making the playoffs. And the fact that he was a first-team all-star his last year, the only year he went to Colorado and won the cup. And so that proved that he was still an elite level player. And even though it's a shame that he went away from his club of 21 years, he's able to get that cup dream realized. It's Lidstrom 7-time Norris to Bork's 5 and 4-time cup winner to Bork's 1. But I took that to mean that Bork toiled and worked for it and was able to amass the individual accolades in a less secure environment, in a less promising outcome kind of position than Lidstrom, because Lidstrom was just blessed with elite Hall of Fame talent all around. But do love Lidstrom. It's very close between the two of them. Of course, Bobby's our universal number one, and we can talk about him, or we don't even have to because everyone already fucking understands. But yeah, Lidstrom is so elite, man. 10-time first-team All-Star as well. Bork 13 though. You know, it's like a couple other things like that, especially with the A-list talent of offensive defensemen that existed in Bork's day.
Even that, like Lidstrom won a Norris Trophy at 40 years old. Like that's where like his last one kind of comes in too, right? Like he was getting the Norris votes, he was getting the All-Star votes and Norris trophies like the entire way through his career. Like it was like there's no like if you look at his 20 some odd seasons, it's like there's no like weak point of that. Yeah. It's just like consistently the best, and when you're also consistently the best player, and you're also, like you said, like Bork played on a lot of teams that were missing the playoffs. It's like as good as he was, it's like he couldn't get Boston over that. That's part of like the whole story with Bork, right? Is like you said, you brought it up earlier, like he had to go cup chasing because he couldn't do it on Boston. Whereas like Lidstrom's, well, I mean, maybe that's an argument for like obviously the Red Wings are better than Boston at that time. But, like,
he went to two finals with the Bruins, 88 and 90. So
yeah,
he was there.
They're not bad. He's not there, but it was like, toward the end of his career, he had to do a little cup chasing. But it was like
19 shots in that one game where Ron Tugnutt made 70 saves, like still the record.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's still a
record. And you watch some of those saves. I know we watched that game together. Like he should have scored a few. Tugnutt was just sensational in that game,
but he didn't.
Last one
and that's why Lidstrom's better.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. If Bork had a couple extra goals from that 19 shot, what's the shooting percentage different? Like, did that ruin a statistical category that he could have over Nick Lidstrom?
Well, I'm glad that our top fives are pretty similar, though. Like, I mean, for the most part, we pretty much.
When I made my list, I was like, the only part of this list that's going to be similar to Robbie and Beda is the top 5.
Yeah. Yeah, everything else.
Your Fetisov pick, it was a little bit of a head scratcher, especially when it's over guys like Chelios and Shore and even freaking like Al McInnes. You had like 19 or something, right? Like, but
you didn't have McInnes that far out, did you?
I had McInnes at 14. Yeah,
14.
So Robbie had him the same. Yeah.
Robbie had him in the same spot. Yeah.
Yeah,
well, apparently you and Robbie made your list together, which is why
it's a lot more congruent agreeing than I would have thought, you know, for all of us, I guess. Like, of course, I figured our top 5s would have maybe all but one thing out of place, like the Coffey and the Pot Van, and then the Harvey and the Bork and the Lidstrom are all like within one of each other pretty much. But our number 1s are the same. Look at that.
I was going to say, this now goes into where you're going to talk about how great Bobby Orr is.
You know what I was thinking, though? Next week, we should do a Bobby Orr game to honor this list. I have so many.
What if I didn't have Bobby Orr as my number 1? Would that have ruined your plan?
No.
Like, I think that's the thing, though. It's like, okay, you know, like just for like a fun exercise, is like, how do you justify? Pick a player and justify him being better than Bobby Orr. Instead of talking about like, because it's like. I mean, you kind of like we're talking about like, you know, guys like Harvey and Lidstrom who have 7 Norris trophies, and you're like, oh yeah, but like they played like 20 seasons. Then you're like, Bobby Orr has 8 Norris trophies. He played like 9 full seasons, or whatever. Like, and he has the 8 Norris trophies. Like there was just, you know,
such a crying shame that he had
it's
that
nuts. It's like I think, you know, Orr had when you were talking about like, I mean, you brought up like Eddie Shore. winning 4 Hearts. We talked. I brought up Pierre Pilote winning 3 Norrises in a row, and it's like when you win like some of these awards so consecutively, it kind of is just like you're the undisputed best player at that position or in the league or whatever. And it's like for Bobby Orr to be like literally just 8 Norris trophies from the second season of his career and win them in a row, like, and it's like nobody in the league could even remotely think about touching him. He's winning Hearts during that time. He's winning Art Ross trophies during that time too. Like it's,
like the year after someone finally breaks 100 points, he's like, oh, that's okay. Like I'll just get 100 assists instead.
Yeah, exactly. It's nuts the thing, like, and I think too, like the big thing with Bobby Orr and stuff as well is like he kind of the style of play that he had kind of changed the way a lot of defensemen would play. So that kind of opened the door for like a lot of the defensemen to kind of go with that more offensive mindset and kind of open up the door for like some of the guys in our top 10, like Bork and Coffey, to play the style of game that they actually played. Right. Whereas, they can kind of focus on like I said, it's like, look at that curve that Coffey used. Like it has no backhand on it. Like you are not using that stick to put the puck off the glass and out. Like you are using that stick to go score goals, even if you're doing it from like the back end. But it's, there's a lot of guys like even to now, it's like you can see like a lot of Bobby Orr influence in just the way like a guy like Erik Karlsson or Drew Doughty even plays hockey, at this point in time too. So it's it is just, it's insane how much better he was than everybody else. And, to that degree, I think like, it's not only that Bobby Orr's the best defenseman of all time. It's like, there's an argument to be made that he's the best player of all time, period.
Phenomenal skater, just rushing the puck. Like there's a 20-minute YouTube compilation of him in his best like rushes. And just like, just man amongst boys, just splitting forwards that are trying to poke him at the center and then cutting in, splitting both D, going around the net, wrap around, centering passes or scoring himself. Like, Paul Coffey has single season record for goals with 48 by D-man, but Bobby Orr had 46 in a slightly smaller schedule by about 4 games when Coffey did it. But like, and that's the thing, it's not like they relied on Bobby Orr to score goals because they had Phil Esposito banging freaking 70 a year a couple times.
Yeah.
And Ken Hodge, Wayne Cashman, Johnny Busick. But Bobby Orr put up 46 one year in 75, the second time he won the Art Ross. 2-time Art Ross. Like, unbelievable.
Well, even more, like, I'm kind of just pulled up his hockey reference page or whatever, just kind of for fun here. You see, there's a bunch of things that obviously stand out. It's like, like the plus 124 season, which is just mind-boggling even today. But it was like, like 1970, he wins Hart Trophy, Norris Trophy, Art Ross, Conn Smythe.
Yeah.
Right. And then he does, and then, 72, he does.
And scores the cup winner.
72, first team All-Star, Hart Trophy, Norris, Conn Smythe again.
And the cup winner.
And the cup winner again. Yeah. Even like 1975, here you got, All-Star 1, Norris, Pearson, Art Ross, or, right. Like and he finished 3rd in Hart voting. Like he doesn't, other than like after, when his final season with Boston where he only played 10 games, then he was off to Chicago. So I'm going to exclude those, I guess, technically 3 seasons there or whatever. He doesn't finish lower than 6th in Hart voting ever in his career. And that's his rookie year. Like it's mind-boggling. And he doesn't, like I say, the worst he ever finished in Norris voting, again, other than those 3 years at the end of his career, was his rookie year, and he finished 3rd.
Like, and he still won the Calder.
And he obviously won the Calder. Yeah, he finished in that rookie year too. I'm kind of looking. He finished 6th in Hart voting as a rookie.
And they were still awful last year of original 6.
Yeah.
Still didn't make the playoffs. Starting to turn things around a little bit with Harry Sinden, but 66, 67. And then his second year when he wins his first out of 8 Norrises, he missed pretty much half the season. That was the first time he had a serious injury, only dressed for 46 games, 31 points, which is, the last 3 years where he only played combined 36 games, like disregard that, right? But so I guess you could say he really only played 8 full seasons.
Like, okay, like here's the silly thing too, It's just like we're saying, it's like, some of those injury plagued, like his final season in Boston, and then when he went on to Chicago. So in his first year with Chicago, he played 20 games. He had 23 points.
Yeah.
Like
he had 27 points in 26 games with Chicago. Like,
yeah, like
one knee.
That's insane. Yeah, like it's even like if you got Bobby Orr at like 30%, which I think is what the Blackhawks actually ended up with, but like Bobby Orr at 30% was still the best defenseman in the league. He was still putting up a point per game. With, like you said, he had no leg. Like it's insane how good he actually was, and it's one of those like I feel like Bobby Orr is still, like, as great as he is, he's still like one of those big like what ifs of like sport history of just like, man, like who is there an athlete more than Bobby Orr in any sport that you were just like, man, I wish that guy didn't get hurt so I could have got like a full 20-year career out of him just to see like what would Bobby Orr have looked like playing hockey in the 80s? Like if you gave like the last 5 to 10 years of Bobby Orr's career and he got to play in the 80s, like what do his numbers actually look like?
Pretty good.
Probably.
You could have banged like a 175. Would that be out of the question?
No, I think it'd been a little late for that at that point.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Yeah, but it's like you said, it's like he's playing in like the late 70s on no knee, still putting up more than a point per game.
Oh, you're saying as if he still played into the
if
80s.
he still played.
Okay,
I'm not saying transplant Bobby Orr into an 80s team. Okay. I'm saying like if his career continued and we would have got to say like, if he actually played a full career, maybe we get like 5 to 10 years of Bobby Orr playing against Wayne Gretzky. Like that could have been a thing that happened.
They just missed the overlap because Bobby Orr sat out the entire 77-78 season and only played 6 games in 78-79 the year before Gretzky comes into the league.
So it's like that's something that it's like we could have saw that, but it's like, he just had all the injuries and stuff, and it's he's the undisputed. It's weird to think that, like, as we've kind of discussed here, he's the undisputed best defenseman of all time. It's weird to think it's like he maybe could have been better too, like, but he was hurt a lot, which is a shame in a way.
We haven't even really addressed his like defensive prowess, but he was brilliant at picking off passes. He could lay the body in the corner. I've never seen him lose a fight. Like, and he said he didn't like to fight. He didn't like that style of play because he's such a gentleman. Like, he's such a good role model for the game too. But any time you look up a Bobby Orr fight on YouTube, he gets the decision pretty much.
Dude, his fight with Pat Quinn is like legendary too.
Yeah,
like that is a good tilt.
And of course, youngest Hall of Fame inductee of all time at age 31, the year after he officially calls it quits, gets the waive period.
Which, I mean, he should. Like if there's anybody that deserved the waiting period to get waived over, what is it, like 8 or 9 guys that got it? Like
10 have had it,
10 have had it? Yeah. So it's like, like I don't know if there'd be like any like more deserving player to get it, like maybe other than Gretzky. That's about it though. Like to actually get that waiting period waived for you, like but yeah, like I think it's without a doubt, like, I've had a couple arguments with my grandfather about trying to be like, hey, is Nick Lidstrom better than Bobby Orr? And every time he just like his rebuttal is just laughing, basically, because as he has informed me many times, there's never been a better hockey player than Bobby Orr, and that guy got to see Orr and Gretzky, so I'll take his word for it.
Well, I'm glad we got one thing on a consensus note here. You can find us at laymansports.com and at Layman Sports on Twitter and Facebook. Where can we find you, lovely gentlemen?
I am at Bressette the Jet on Twitter and Instagram, so head over there.
And I'm at Michael Beda on Twitter and Instagram. No underscores, all lowercase. If you want to score, give the puck to number 4, but Bobby Orr, don't play hockey no more.
And you can find me at Really Robbie C on both Twitter and Instagram. You can also find CPR on SoundCloud, YouTube, and Google Play. For Derek, for Beda, I'm Robbie. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.